Hey guys, it's Core here, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be joining the tier list shenanigans. Now, if you guys have noticed, there's been a lot of videos from content creators about tier lists, and at the moment, so this is kind of how it started. It started with Droodles here, who made a video earlier, making a tier 10 tier list, and then later on, Nino made his own video about all tier 10 lists are nonsense, and here's mine. And then after that, in the end, Droodles ended up making he responded to that tier list. He obviously didn't agree with them. All tier lists, so nonsense, as you can see, he proceeds to make the most nonsense ever. So basically, you can tell Droodles does not agree with what Nino did. And then later on as well, Economics said, made his own video as well. All tier lists are not nonsense. Here's why. So just a little bit of disclaimer here. I'm friends with all these people. So anything I have to say about their tier list, nothing personal. But you know what? I want to make some more disagreement on the internet. Why not? You know, why don't we make our own tier list? And I'm gonna show you guys why my tier list is better than all the other ones. So, with that in mind, I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get to it. Okay, so here's the thing about all the tier lists that I've seen so far on YouTube. So a lot of them have pretty cool ideas, and one thing I liked about Nino's tier list is that he included the idea about trying to balance the tier list between strength and difficulty at the same time. Now, that's cool and all, but in my opinion, I don't think that's the best way to do it. And I also like what Doodles did as well. He also, I didn't really talk about it earlier, but if you go check his channel, actually, he did actually do a live stream earlier. And he basically had a bunch of people who were watching the live stream vote on the tier 10 tier list, like what they think should be in which tier. So I thought that was actually really cool too. And I was actually in that live stream, I was watching it, and that was a really cool idea. But in the same time, like I couldn't help but feel like I completely disagree with every single tier list that has been made. And I think, honestly, the underlying problem here is that none of these tier lists are made, with the concept that, a lot of these tier lists are made like they're suggesting tanks based on the fact that other people are going to make mistakes against these tanks because they're, the slightly harder tanks to play or slightly easier tanks to play, so like less mistakes will be made, that kind of thing. And in my opinion, I think that's a very bad way to make a tier list, and I'm going to make a tier list based on my own professional tournament experience. Obviously, if you know me, I played tournaments for a very long time, and I've probably played tournaments for as long as I can remember, very high level tournaments. And in the same time, something I always notice is that there's always a reason why tanks are meta in tournaments. And I feel like every time, Wargaming tries to balance the game, or, anyone tries to make a tier list in that matter, first thing you have to look at is the tournament. What is the tournament meta? Why are good players spamming a certain tank over the other tanks? I mean, is there a reason? There must be a reason, right? And of course there's a reason, and I'm going to show you why in this video here. But thing is, bottom line here is that it's not really about if it's easy to play or not. In the end, in my opinion, a tier list should be made with what the maximum capacity a certain tank can achieve in the hands of the best possible player. So you take the best players in the server, you put them all into different tanks. Who's going to win, guys? Who do you think is going to win based on the tanks that they're in, right? Obviously, they're all good players. They're all going to not make mistakes. They're all going to play really well. But there are certain characteristics of certain tanks that are just exaggerated and more overpowered than other ones. And that's kind of where I'm going to make my tier list. Now, my tier list is going to be very tournament heavy focused, but thing is, obviously 90% of the tanks in tier 10 are not used in tournaments, right? They're not meta, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to rate them the same way. I'm going to rate them exactly the same way. Obviously I'm going to make it more in a way like, let's say this: you take two very good players, you have one guy in one tank and one guy in another tank, and you put them in the exact same battle situation, at different times basically, and you tell them, okay, go win the game for us. Are they going to be able to win the game? What can they do? What's the maximum output of efficiency, the maximum output of impact that they can do, with the tank that they're given? That's what I'm making my tier list based on. For the rest of the tanks, obviously, I have my own tournament tier list. Probably in the S tier will be mostly tournament heavy meta focused tanks, and then more toward the A tier will be more toward the pub match area. B tier, same. C tier as well, and then D tier, just like the sad tier that nobody wants to play at all. So again, that's my methodology, and if you want to stick around, it's going to be a long video. I'm going to go through a lot of detail for each tank. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. I'm going to have a lot of different dividers in the video. You can check in the video links and see which time, the time frame for each section I'm about to talk about. And then what I want to do as well at the very end of the video, I'm going to try to compare my own personal tier list with the other tier lists that have been made. Obviously, I won't take too long to do that since it'll be quite a long video, but I hope you guys enjoy. And if you do, make sure you smash that like button. It helps out a lot. And make sure you subscribe as well. As I think I did a pretty good job here at the tier list, and I'm very curious to see what you guys say. Let me know all your opinions. Disagree or negative opinions and positive opinions are welcome. Let me know in the comments, and yeah, let's get the party started. Alright guys, so let's get started. So here's how I'm going to do my tier list here. So first we're going to start with S tier. Now the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to start based on the tank category. So we have light tanks, we have mediums, we have heavies, and we have TDs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each tier list here, and let's say we start with light tanks. I'm going to choose the first light tanks, put them in S tier, move on to the medium tanks, which belong in S tier, then move on to the heavy tanks, put them in S tier, and then move on to TDs and put them in S tier. So that way everything's sorted that way based on the tanks. Like like TDs obviously have a different role than heavy tanks and light tanks as well. So you can't really compare them one-on-one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare them to each other, and I'm going to go down the list until we get to the very end. So with that in mind here, let's get started. Now, moving on to light tanks here, my number one light tank for sure would be T100. The thing that makes this tank really good is, again, super low profile, and it has camo net. It has the best camo rating in the game, basically, for a light tank. And when you put camo net on top of that, this thing is very, very dangerous. It will outspot basically every other light tank in the game. It has the best camo, with respect to its view range. And at the same time, it's very low profile. It has a good gun as well. It shoots premium AP, which is very, very strong. Good on the move shot dispersion, and just overall best light tank in the game. 100% would put it in the number one position. So with that in mind, moving on to the second tank here, I'm going to put Ryan Mattel directly behind it. Ryan Mattel is basically the T100 LT. The only difference is it is bigger, so it has a bigger alpha, bigger profile, which also makes it pretty easy to HE. This thing is a HE magnet, basically. It gets HE'd everywhere. And the gun is also very inaccurate on the move. However, the one thing this tank does have that the T100 does not have is gun depression. That's the only reason I put it in the S tier, is because it can be used in certain maps with hills and stuff where the gun depression can really come into hand. It's very useful, to be honest. It also does have a speed boost, tungsten, everything that you could possibly want from a light tank, all the gimmicks, all the consumables, have adaptive concealment and the tracer shells. So both of them are very good tanks, but in my opinion, T100 is still a little bit better. With that in mind, I think the only other light tank I would put in S tier is the Bat Chat. Now, Bat Chat with the 4-shot gun, it can be extremely deadly in the middle of brawls here. Now, let's say you're in a brawl, and this Bat Chat is hunting down a light tank, all right? If this guy catches a light tank with, who's not ready, you put a whole clip into the Bat Chat, 1,000 damage clip, basically, and then the light tank can only shoot you once, essentially. So that's the reason Bat Chat is very strong. The 4-shot gun is really, really strong, especially with the shell reload consumable. But the Bat Chat in a lot of situations will not do as good as the light tank will, because again, it does not have the camo that the light tank does, and at the same time, it can't really shoot on the move as the light tank can. So light tank in a pure DPM 1v1 fight, I think the light tank will win. But it's the Bat Chat can still be very useful in brawls, though. That's the only reason I put it in S tier. The clip is very nice. But yeah, moving on to medium tanks here. Now, no surprise at all, my number one medium will be the E50. Best tank in the game. Basically, it has the best characteristics of any medium. It has the most armor basically in any medium. Has good DPM, reactive armor, and it's fast. There's nothing more we can ask for. This is a perfect medium for a brawl setting. This medium tank could even take on heavy tanks and still win the fight. 1v1 without even any, just by the fact it has reactive and also has good armor basically. So any tank shooting is going to have to shoot premium AP at it while it also has reactive. So even then, it's going to do less damage. So E50 for sure, my number one pick. Right after the number one pick here, I think I'm going to go directly with the Patton. 100% Patton is the best tank. Patton is basically an E50, just without as much armor. That is the only reason the Patton is not as good as the E50 in my opinion. Overall, the gun on the Patton is actually better than the E50 gun. However, just the armor, the lack of armor makes the E50 a little bit better, but still both are worthy of being an S tier, and both are very good tanks. Moving on, T22 would be my third one. T22 is a very unique tank, a very strong medium as well. The one characteristic T22 has that the E50 and the Patton do not have is the turret. The turret is completely unpennable. Full red, there's nothing you can really do to pen the turret. So in a hull down situation, T22 will actually do really well compared to the Patton and E50. E50 can be penned in the turret fairly easily, with heavy tanks can pen it in the turret. Patton does have a massive cupola, and also the cheeks are pretty weak. So T22 in that sense is very strong, very unique as well. One of the best armor mediums for a turret, basically. So that's what, and also the sides are obviously super troll. The front is also pretty troll too. So a very good tank, has tungsten and low profile. So low profile helps you hide the turret. One thing it's missing is the gun depression, and it is a little bit slow, but other than that, it's honestly very good. I would still put it in S tier. Very good medium tank for sure. Moving on, next one here I would put in S tier would be the Chinese medium, the 1-to-1. This is a bit of a controversial one, but The reason I'm putting it in here is because it has reactive tungsten and it also kind of has similar characteristics as the T-22. Now the turret is not unpennable, but it can still be penned pretty easily. So it doesn't have as good armor as the T-22, but it's very low profile. It has reactive armor and it has decent armor on the front. On the hull is pretty bouncy as well. You will get a lot of bounces with this thing. Is pretty troll. The one thing it does have though is tungsten and it has a big alpha gun. Now that big alpha gun can be used to really good effect, especially against enemy light tanks. At T100 up against the WZ 1-to-1, like a pure 1v1 fight, though, WZ will destroy the T100. It has reactive tungsten. You will just destroy this guy in 4 shots, basically kill him in 4 shots with the tungsten. Whereas the T100 will have to shoot you a lot more times because it has to have like has to deal with your reactive armor basically, which is very strong. So 1-to-1, I'm putting it also just behind the T-22. Obviously not as versatile as the T-22. The on the move, obviously, you can't shoot on the move, but it can be very useful in some situations. So I'm putting it here. I think as far as all the mediums, this is the S tier list for the medium tanks here. I'm going to move on to the heavies here. Now heavy, no surprise at all, AMX M4 MLE. Best tank in the game, like hands down best tank, not just best heavy, but best tank. This thing is basically can do everything. It's fast, it has really good armor, the turret is like unpennable. You can't pen the turret at all, no matter what. Even a Hori with gold pen, like the highest pen in the game, cannot pen the gun manlet. It is very, very good tank. Very fast, good DPM as well. The one thing missing on the tank is like the gun is a little bit inaccurate, and it's just APCR standard, which is also a bit of a shame. But other than that, this is best tank in the game. One thing it does have also is a lot of hit points. So you basically, this thing can go to medium side of the map. It's fast enough to do that. Like it's not gonna, it's not that slow. It's very fast. It's basically like an E50 version of a heavy. It can do everything. It has the most armor, most mobility as well for the armor that it has. Good DPM. Good heat pen as well, actually, so it does have pretty good pen as well. And yeah, just overall very good tank, lots of hit points as well. So by no, like 2750 hit points with reactive armor is basically more armor than a mouse, or more HP than a mouse actually. So yeah, basically best tank in the game, hands down. Would put it at the very top of S tier here. Now moving on to the second heavy, I'm gonna put the 215B. The reason I'm putting 215B up here is because, to be honest, the only tank that can really counter the MLE is the 215B. 215B has speed boost, so it's also pretty fast, similar to the MLE. It has a really good gun, Hesh as well. And in a face hug, I did a video on the review on the 215B, a very in-depth review. If you want to check it out, you can go do that right now. But yeah, basically 215B essentially counters the MLE in every way. It can Hesh the side of the MLE, it can Hesh the cupola in the MLE, and in a face hug, the 215B does fare pretty well as well. So overall, very good tank. The one thing that kind of sucks for this tank is just the fact it's a rear mounted tank. That's the only thing that kind of sucks. It really limits the situation you're able to peek in, because if you're rear mounted, the first thing your enemy is going to see when you're peeking a position is your like engine area, like the front of your tank, and they can shoot you way before you can shoot them back. So peeking is kind of hard in this tank, but overall still a very good tank. Speed boost, it has basically everything a heavy tank wants. Insane gun as well, like the Hesh is really, really strong, and in this meta Hesh counters reactive armor a lot, because MLE driving at you with reactive armor, if you're able to Hesh them, you basically negate the reactive armor in the first place. So yeah, very good tank for that reason. Now moving on to the third tank here. Third tank would be for me the Super Conk. Basically Super Conk is basically an MLE, just slower. It has a better gun than the MLE, like better DPM, but overall it less armor and slower. That's the only drawback of the Super Conk. Both of them have reactive, both of them have similar hit points, I guess. MLE has a little bit more, but yeah, Super Conk is still a very good tank though. It does have gun depression, whereas the MLE does not have gun depression. So that's the only advantage the Super Conk has over the MLE. Other than that, the MLE is basically better in every way. So Super Conk still very good. I'm putting it in top of S tier still because it has reactive, good DPM, decent like armor as well. Although the one thing with the Super Conk you need to watch out for is the HE splash damage. Now, an MLE fighting a Super Conk in a 1v1 situation, to be honest, the MLE can just HE the Super Conk in the turret. You will take like 200 to 250 damage each shot. Basically, half of what an AP shot would do is HE damage on the Super Conk. That's how bad the HE is very not HE resistant at all. So, and that's another big drawback of the Super Conk. But other than that, it's very, very good tank. In the right hands, if you're playing somewhat passive, you're not front line in a Super Conk, you will do a lot of damage with the DPM. It's basically a 215B, just forward mounted, and you have reactive instead of the speed boost. So essentially the same thing. The Hesh obviously isn't as good obviously on the Super Conk either, but it's still workable. You can Hesh the back of an MLE pretty easily. The back of the turret as well is Heshable with the Super Conk. So very good tank. Moving on, very next tank afterwards is for me going to be the E6. E6 for me is basically this tank. If this tank had reactive armor, it would be the best tank in the game, in my opinion. It's very fast, like much faster than the MLE actually. And I said the MLE was fast, but the E6 is even faster. And the E6 has a much better gun. It has a premium, it has like AP as well, so it doesn't shoot APCR, it has AP standard. And in the same time, it also has a good DPM. So basically, it's a better version of the Super Conk in every way. The only reason this thing is behind the Super Conk is because it doesn't have reactive armor. Really, that's the only thing. And reactive armor in tournament meta is very important. You need reactive for everything basically. Otherwise, you're gonna lose the trade. And the E6 in a 1v1 with the Super Conk will win just because it has reactive armor. That's kind of how it works, you know. So for me, E6 still is very good, extremely good tank still. And for pubs, also extremely strong tank. But you do have to be very careful of the fact that they don't have reactive armor. So if you get caught into a fight that you can't really win with your DPM, it's gonna not really turn out that well for you. But other than that, very good tank. Would definitely rate it there. Now, the very next tank I would put after the E6 would be the Kron. Kron for me, one of the best heavies in the game overall as a concept as a heavy tank. Basically, you have the best turret of any heavy. You don't have any weak spots apart from like a very tiny slither of like the top of your turret. You have a slight cupola there, but that's a very hard shot to hit. Even pro players won't really hit that shot very often. But basically, the Kron is impervious to any, like, you know, if it's hauled down, it cannot be penned, and it's very HE resistant as well. Unlike the Super Conk, which a Super Conk takes like 200 HE, the Kron takes like maybe 50 or something if an Emily shoots it with HE. So Kron, very good tank, as a clip as well, very deadly clip too. But the main benefit of the Kron is the fact that it just completely hauled down plus a clip. It's a very good tank. It has speed boost as well and aim reticle too. So if you're trying to do like a trade between, like, you know, like let's say you're trading with other tanks, that aim reticle consumable you have is going to be very useful. Very good tank. The Kron would be a really good tank. The only thing that's making the Kron not the best tank in the game is the fact that it, you know, has to fight tanks with reactive armor. Now, reactive armor is kind of counters clippers in a way, because when a clipper shoots at you, right, you activate reactive armor. You take a whole clip from their clip. You basically take all 3 shots while you have reactive armor. That's the best use of reactive armor you can possibly get, basically, you know, because then you can shoot the Kron 3 times back before, you know, he can, like, you know, like essentially you can win the trade essentially just because you have reactive armor. Whereas if the Kron is a single shotgun, a single shotgun will shoot an MLE who used his reactive armor for like 10 seconds, right? And then once he reloads, the reactive armor will have already like expired or whatever, so then we'll shoot him again as just continuous. The Kron, on the other hand, if you dump your entire clip into a reactive armor tank, yeah, it's good damage and stuff, but at the same time, you're destroying your DPM, and that's basically, you're making the reactive armor the most useful thing ever on the MLE or any other tank that has reactive, essentially. So that's the reason Kron is not the best tank ever, but it is still very strong. You can't really spam it in tournaments, but it's still very strong in pubs. And yeah, overall, I would still rate it very highly, very high S tier rank there for the Kron. Now, moving on after the Kron, next one I'm gonna choose is, I think, gonna be Chieftain. Let's get to the Chieftain real quick here. Chieftain, there we go. Okay, Chieftain basically is a 215B just without the speed boost. Now, Chieftain does have a forward mounting turret, which is much better actually than the rear mounted turret of the MLE of the 215B there, but the problem with the Chieftain is that it doesn't have a premium AP pen, and it really struggles, to be honest, against MLEs in a face hug. Like, let's say an MLE face hugs a Chieftain, there's literally nothing a Chieftain can do. It's just going to die. Like, it can't pen the MLE upper plate at all with the gun that it has. It doesn't have enough pen for it. But the Chieftain, if you play super passive in the back of the map and you have good support and you have good teammates around you, and like in the hands of a pro player, this tank can be still very strong because it has tungsten and it has Hesh. So basically, this tank can actually do more Hesh than a 205B can, just because it has tungsten. But the only thing is, like, when it comes to tanks that are facing it, it's going to be much harder to get those headshots in, you know, especially if it's an MLE face hugging it. So that's kind of why I have the Chieftain behind the Kron even. But overall, the Chieftain is still a very good tank. In the hands of a good player will be very useful. My very next pick after the Chieftain would be the 50B. Now, 50B is similar to the Kron. It has the same problem as the Kron, as I mentioned. The 50B problem is actually magnified over the Kron, because the Kron can at least shoot one shot in, and if he sees a guy using reactive, he can just wait out the reactive and then shoot the rest of his clip and the reactive runs out. 50B, on the other hand, cannot do that. It does not an auto reloader, it's an auto loader. So basically with 50B, you have to shoot all your shots at once, and it has no armor as well in the turret. So the only saving grace for the 50B is the fact that it has reactive armor. Other than that, though, 50B is very situational, very hard to play, and I think with this pick here, we're kind of starting to get towards more of the pub range tanks here. So everything before the 50B, these are all pretty like standard tournament tanks, I would say. But after the 50B, it's more like, you know, directed towards pub players. 50B is still very extremely good in pubs actually. Like in a 1v1 with any tank, you know, you will basically win the 1v1 SN because it will just clip out, reactive armor, take the shot, gladly take the one shot or whatever it takes, as long as it's not a big HE shot, you know, which you have to watch out for the 50B because it's very HEable on the sides. So other than that, 50B I think is a very good tank. I would definitely put it in S tier as well. Very mobile, very fast, has reactive armor, has a deadly clip as well. Just the only thing is that in this meta, a lot of tanks have reactive, and yeah, clippers are not that useful against reactive armor tanks. But with that in mind, I am going to put the Rhinoceronte right behind the 50B. Now, Rhinoceronte is basically, in my opinion, a worse version of the Kron. The only problem with the Rhinoceronte is that, you know, in a hull down fight, it's not as hull down as the Kron is. The Kron turret is much better than the Rhinoceronte. The Rhinoceronte can be penned with heat. Like, it's not 100% pen, but it can be penned with heat more reliably than the Kron can. So Rhinoceronte is still very good. It is missing the third shot that the Kron has. Basically very similar as the Kron. It's just missing the speed boost, but other than that, still a very good tank. Worthy of S tier for sure, and in pubs, this thing destroys in pubs. It's a very good tank. Highly recommend as well. It's probably one of the best tech tree tanks overall in this meta. You know, you look at all the other tanks here, half of these tanks are you know, like collector tanks. CT22, MLE, Super Conk, T9526, Chieftain. I mean, a lot of these heavy tanks are all collector tanks. This is one of the very few super good, you know, tech tree tanks I would recommend. Moving on from Rhinoceronte, my next pick is going to be the IS-4. IS-4, it's very situational, but the one thing the IS-4 has going for it that no other heavy really has is the turret. It has very good turret, and on top of that, it has super speed boost, which basically means the IS-4 in the first, you know, like whenever you're about to use a speed boost, it basically is the fastest heavy in the game. Even faster than E6 with speed boost, you know? The speed boost on the IS-4 makes it go faster than E6 in the beginning of the game. However, the E6 is more versatile because it is has gun depression, more gun depression, and is just overall faster. Even when the speed boost runs out on the IS-4, you become much slower, so it's not comparable to the E6. But the IS-4 is still a very good tank. It can side scrape, has very good turret, and it shoots premium. It shoots like standard AP, which is also a huge thing as well. A lot of these tanks shoot like standard APCR, you know, like the MLE or whatever. So IS-4 is still very good in that way. But without the speed boost, I think IS-4 would not be S tier at all. But because it does have the speed boost, that's the reason it's kind of near the end of S tier here. Now, with that in mind, I think that's about every single heavy tank I would put in S tier. So let's move on to TDs. TDs going to be very simple. The only TD worth mentioning in S tier is Hori. Hori, again, it has reactive armor, has the best penetrating gun in the game. Basically, it has premium AP, which has insane penetration. Much better than heat, much better than APCR for sure. So Hori, very good. It also has pretty troll armor. The one thing that sucks about the Hori is zero gun depression. So basically, anytime you're, you know, the zero gun depression kind of makes it a difficult tank to play on any kind of like hilly map. But it is fast enough where you can't just like drive over hills and just like face hug stuff and just pen everything you see. The Hori can basically pen the Emily upper plate, no problem at all. It just pens everything. And the Hori is very good, and that's the reason I'm putting it in S tier. It also has reactive armor, and the gun is accurate. So overall, good tank in general. Now I think that sums it up for all the S tier picks here. This is my list, and now I'm going to move on towards the A tier. Now A tier for me is going to be a bit of a shift here. So most of the tanks I posted here in the S tier are for tournament heavy, like meta based tanks essentially, right? Like good teams will use these tanks often. However, A tier here is a little bit more towards like the pub matches here. Still very good tanks, and they can be used in tournaments, but not as often as the tanks in S tier, and more geared toward the pub players here. So with that in mind, let's go to the light tanks real quick. Only light tank worth mentioning for me in A tier is the Chinese light, the WZ132-1. This tank, again, it's a very good tank. The only thing that kind of sucks about it is the on the move. You cannot really shoot on the move, which is a similar problem as the Rheinmetall Panzer right there. The only difference though is that the Rheinmetall Panzer has the gun depression. That's the only reason I rank it a little bit higher than the WZ132. The WZ132 is still a very good tank though, like a very good tank, like probably top of A tier here if I had to rank it compared to all the other tanks. But it's still, you know, just the lack of gun depression basically makes it a worse T100 in my opinion. It does have a lot of view range, but in my opinion, camo net in tournaments at least is much more important than view range. And yeah, I think overall that's my rating for the 132-1 there. That's the only light tank I'm putting in A tier. Other lights I would not put them there. Now moving on to the mediums real quick. First medium I'm going to put in A tier actually is going to probably be surprising for a lot of you guys, but it's going to be the T62A. Now T62A, basically it is a T22 with speed boost. That's what the T62A is. The turret on the T62A is a little bit worse than T22, but other than that, it is a very well armored medium tank, especially if you're like playing hull down somewhere. And the upper plate as well is pretty troll too. So very similar to T22 there. Just the 62, the only thing kind of sucking for it is the DPM. It has much lower DPM than the T22 does. Also does not have tungsten, so it's even worse actually when you think about it that way. But T62, the one thing going for it is the speed boost. Now, speed boost can allow the T62 to get to some positions much faster than any other medium can, basically. So basically, you look at the E50, you look at the M48, you look at the T22. These are all very fast medium tanks, but if there is a position you need to reach before the enemy medium can reach, and you have a speed boost T62, he's going to beat you to it. So that's the main reason I have the 62 up there. It's, again, very, very strong tank, and in my opinion, it kind of makes it top of A tier there for mediums. Moving on to next medium here, it's going to be the 121B. 121B, again, basically the exact same thing as a T62A, just in my opinion, T62A is a little bit better turret, and the gun seems a little more accurate at T62A, although very close. This here is pretty much like personal preference, to be honest. Like, either one can like work for the other. I think 121B works as well, like, you know, it can be ahead of the T62A. It's just a personal preference thing, and for me, I don't really like the 121B that much. I find the armor on the T62A much, much better than the 121B armor, so that's the reason I have it there. But both still very good tanks, very good mediums, and yeah, I would put them up here. Now moving on, as you can see here, we had both the mediums here are more mobility focused, and for me, I would rank mobility on top of DPM, but not by a whole lot, and very next tanks here are going to be DPM heavy ones. So looking at the DPM ones, CS63, I'm putting it right after the 121B. To be honest, personally, I would actually even rate this a little bit ahead of this, for pubs at least. But I'm making this list in terms of like pro players fighting against each other 1v1. To be honest, the C62, that speed boost somewhere strong ahead of the CS will actually win the 1v1 over the CS. So even though the CS has better DPM, better gun, everything, the tungsten, everything, but the CS is still a very good tank. You know, if you make a slight mistake in T62A, I think CS will win this 1v1 for sure. And again, CS is a very good tank. I'm putting it up here. And right after the CS, I'm putting the Leopard with it. Now, both these tanks are basically the same tank. The only reason I put the CS a little bit ahead of the Leopard is because the CS is lower profile and is a little bit harder to HE. Leopard here, if you take a Leopard out, you basically get heshed in the front by 215B, heshed in the front by Chieftain, basically HE anywhere on the side, you know, whereas the sides on the CS are a little bit easier to hide. The Leopard is a much taller tank than the CS, so it's much harder to hit. However, the Leopard has a better gun than the CS. So if you're going to play the Leopard as a TD, which, you know, to be honest, if you're running a Leopard, that's how you should use it. Basically somewhere in the back of the map, sniping with the really accurate gun that you have, the Leopard is actually going to be better. However, when it comes to a brawl situation, I think the CS is going to be slightly better. It does have tungsten, which the Leopard does not have, and also has, you know, a little bit easier to kind of hide the HE-able parts of your tank. So that's the only reason I do that rating. Right after the Leopard here, I'm going to do 4202. 4202, again, the Hesh is very strong, but this is a very situational. Now, if you look at 4202, it's basically the medium version of a Chieftain MK6 here. Basically, Hesh gun only. You will struggle to pen anything that has armor, really. Like E50 face hogging you is gonna suck for the like 4202. You're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna be able to pen them. Basically, GG, go to garage. You know, nothing you can do. However, if you play in the hands of a good player, the 4202, if you play passively enough, and you're looking for the headshots on the MLEs, on the 215Bs, on the super conks, basically this thing can hesh any heavy tank. And if you have like the medium side controlled, and you don't have to worry about like a 1v1 versus an E50 or something, the 4202 can be very useful because it can just hesh the side of every tank in the game. So for that reason, I'm putting it in A tier. Still very good tank. It just kind of struggles in the 1v1 situations against like another, you know, like E50 or something, or a Patton even. But other than that, still very good tank and worthy of A tier in my opinion. Moving on to the next tank in A tier, I would put the STB for the gun depression. Again, STB basically has insane gun depression. It has pretty good like premium AP pen as well, which is the same thing that the T100 has actually. So STB is very good. The only thing that's kind of like lacking for the STB is the speed. It is a very slow medium tank, and against like, you know, like an E50, like full rushing, you're not really able to avoid him that much. And yeah, the STB again is very good because of the gun depression. It has a good turret as well, armor, but it does have a massive cupola on the top of the tank there. So the cupola, a lot of good players will actually end up trading you in the cupola. It's not really a tank you can peek super hull down and like expect to win the trade all the time. You can get hit in the cupola quite often. However, that like 9 degrees of gun depression is insane, really. So I think, yeah, overall, STB is still a very good A tier tank. It's just compared to the rest of the meta tanks here, it just doesn't do anything super amazingly. You know, like basically a Patton can do what the STB does. The only difference is the Patton has reactive armor, you know, whereas the STB does not. That's basically how the STB works. Both tanks have gun depression. Both tanks have similar turrets essentially. Just the Patton has reactive. That's the biggest difference really. So that's the reason the SCP is not higher ranked for me. But Moving on, I think for A tier, to be honest, A tier has a lot of medium tanks are actually pretty good for A tier. Now, going for the rest here, I'm actually going to put the Progetto and the Caro both right next to each other in A tier. Now, I'm ranking the Progetto a little bit ahead. Just because it has slightly more troll armor than the Caro does. Progetto's like upper plate is super troll. Even heavy tanks shooting it will bounce a lot of times actually. You know, especially if it's like APCR from like an MLE or something, it will a lot of times will actually just bounce the Progetto. So Progetto's still very good. It does have a clip auto reloader. In my opinion, very good tank in general. However, as I said earlier, auto reloaders are not really the strongest against reactive armor. And again, an E50 reactive armor will just destroy a Progetto, to be honest. But, you know, Progetto can still be used in general for pub games. It's a very good tank against pub. And it will counter light tanks very easily because, again, you get that clip early on. So if you run into a light tank, you dump your whole clip into him before the light tank can even shoot you. It's basically like what a Batchat would do, just it has more armor than a Batchat. And you know, the gun is a little bit longer, you know, interclip. But other than that, it is basically a Batchat. But in my opinion, the Batchat is still a better tank than the Progetto in a 1v1. Batchat will just dump his clip, run away, reload, dump his clip again, kill the Progetto. And yeah, Progetto can't really chase the Batchat down. It's not fast enough. It's not fast enough to chase any light tank down, actually. But against other medium tanks, it's still pretty good, in my opinion. I would put it in kind of like near the end of A tier, to be honest. But yeah, that's my ranking for all the mediums here. Other than that, no other medium for me would take the A tier position here. Let's go on to the heavy tanks here. Heavy tanks, the best heavy tank for sure for me in A tier would be the Concept 1B. Now, Concept 1B is basically an E6, just missing the cupola, which is a good thing. The Concept has a very good turret, lots of gun depression as well, and it cannot be penned in the turret at all, actually. So Concept is a very good tank. The only thing that kind of sucks for the Concept is the fact that it shoots APCR standard, and also the alpha on it is kind of low. It has 380 alpha, so basically you're essentially like a medium tank shooting, you know? Like you have basically similar alpha to a Leopard, similar alpha to CS. I mean, it essentially is a medium tank on a heavy tank profile with a better turret. But still, in some positions, this thing it can be a complete beast, especially if it's a hull down position that needs gun depression. Not many tanks will be able to play like that kind of position, except the Concept, to be honest. So, top of A tier for me, a very good heavy tank, used in tournaments quite a bit actually as well. Even though it is an A tier, it's not heavily used in tournaments, but it can be used in a lot of positions and situations. So, in my opinion, still a very good tank. Moving on to the next heavy tank behind it, I'm going to put the Type 71. Type 71, I run gun depression on it, and the thing about the gun depression is that Type 71, first of all, is a super slow tank. That's the main drawback of the tank. This tank would be probably an S tier, actually, if it was a little bit faster. Because it has decent DPM, it has crazy high premium AP pen as well, which is something you see with the Hori. Like, it has similar pen levels as a Hori does. You know, it's that crazy on a heavy tank. And it has good armor as well, the Type 71. Good armor, forward-facing turret, so it's very good for peeking as well. Just the only drawback, really, that this tank has is the mobility. It sucks. It sucks at rotating, very unflexible. It's just, you know, like, if you have to go somewhere and you have to, like, make a push or something, it sucks at pushing. It's the slowest thing ever. That's the only reason. But other than that, if you're playing somewhere hull down, similar as like a Concept, basically, if you're playing hull down and you know that like the enemy is going to have to push into you, it's a very good tank because you'll be able to pen them a lot. Like the Type 71 will destroy a Super Conk actually in a 1v1 situation. The Type 71 will just pen the Super Conk straight over and over again. The armor on the Super Conk won't even matter. Same kind of on a 215B, to be honest. It will just pen the turret on the 215B very easily. The only thing it can't really pen that easily is maybe an MLE because the gun manly on the MLE is just unpennable. But other than that, Type 71 is still a very good tank. It's just, yeah, the only thing is just the speed, really. And again, that's kind of why it goes at the bottom of A tier here. Not an S tier, but even though, to be honest, it does have the characteristics to be an S tier tank, it just isn't fast enough to be one. That's the only thing I have to say bad about it. But overall, very, very good tank. I do really enjoy playing it in pubs. Very good tank. And in pubs, this thing will do very well as well, actually. Just the mobility as well might kind of catch up to you a little bit sometimes. But other than that, very, very good tank. Followed by the Type here. My very next heavy tank is going to be a VZ55 here. Now, VZ55 is basically a Rhinoceronte, just with worse reverse speed, in my opinion. Basically, both of them have decent armor. Both of them are, you know, pretty similar playstyle. But just the fact that the reverse speed on the VZ55 is so shit is the reason why the Rhinoceronte is an S tier and this thing is an A tier. Now, this thing is still a beast in pubs. Like, don't get me wrong, this thing is really good. And in the hands of a good player will completely clap, like, you know, people with this tank. The only thing, again, as I said, is the fact it's an auto loader and not an auto reloader again as well. And reactive armor in this meta, you know, kind of completely counters auto loaders, to be fair. So then the fact that the reinforcement can shoot one shot in, and if the guy uses reactive, you know, you can just wait the reactive out and dump the rest of your clip in when you're reloaded. That makes the reinforcement better for me than the VZ55. But still, VZ55 in a pub match setting, very, very strong. It's not really going to be used in tournaments a whole lot, but it is extremely good in pub matches, and I would highly recommend it. Probably one of the most fun like tech tree tanks to play, to be fair. Very similar playstyle as the Kron, just, you know, the gun hits a little bit harder in my opinion, and it has, like, again, it just shoots it shoots standard AP, which is really, really nice, to be honest. Right after VZ55, my very next pick is going to be 60TP. Now 60TP in the past has been a super highly meta tank. It used to be the tournament meta back in the day when it had premium standard AP actually as the gun, like as for its gun, and it also had like slightly more DPM and better reverse speed. However, still this tank has all the characteristics to be a very good S tier tank. The only thing that sucks for this tank is the DPM, first of all, and second of all is you get APCR standard, which completely kills this tank, because this tank, again, the only thing that is going for this tank is the fact that it has tungsten and it has a huge alpha gun. So tungsten with alpha, basically, if you're using tungsten AP, you're basically going to get shots for around like 750 plus damage. Very high alpha. And on top of that, it is pretty hull down as well. It does have a small cupola on it, which is pretty hard to hit, to be fair. But other than that, very hull down tank. Very good tank overall. This tank would be amazing if it didn't have APCR standard. Now, APCR standard kind of forces you to shoot heat more often. And even heat isn't the best thing ever, but heat is still doable. But the problem with heat is that kind of starts to kind of diminish the purpose of the tank altogether. The tank is for big alpha, for big damage, and once you start shooting heat, you're doing less damage. So it's kind of negating the damage, and on top of that, you're shooting tanks with reactive most of the time. So in my opinion, it goes kind of near the end of A tier here. It is still a very good heavy tank. If they buffed it a little bit and made it like shoot AP, I think it would probably go back to where it used to be on the S tier, but for now, I'm keeping it in the bottom here, a little bit behind the VZ55. Right after the 60TP, my very next pick here is going to be the Chinese 113. This heavy tank here, basically, it's, imagine an IS-4, but with more DPM, except it's lower profile, and the turret is in the middle of the tank. Now, the only reason why I have the IS-4 above it is because, first of all, IS-4 has speed boost, which is pretty huge. But also the fact that the IS-4 has a front-facing turret, whereas this turret kind of feels more towards like the back and the middle of the tank here. Now, this does kind of make the tank harder to play in a peekaboo playstyle. It's kind of, this tank, you have to play it more in a side scraping, let the enemy push you and you're just farming off of them kind of playstyle. You're not really able to be super aggressive, although this tank is low profile, which is actually very useful in some situations, because you can get into cover behind some debris that, you know, other tanks can't really use. So it's still a very good tank. It's just a little bit more limited in my opinion, and just the lack of a speed boost, the lack of any like really good consumables for it, kind of make it, you know, behind the 60TP for me. If this thing had tungsten or reactive or even speed boost, it would honestly probably be an S tier actually, but because it doesn't, that's the reason it's an A tier for me. Moving on, I'm putting the i7 right behind it. To be honest, the i7, it does have the consumable, it has tungsten. However, in my opinion, the i7, just the fact it has such a bad gun that the 113's gun is much more accurate, much more higher penetration, and much more DPM as well overall. So 113 is just better version of the i7 for me. i7 for me is just kind of like a worse version of the IS-4 in every way. The gun is worse, the mobility is worse, and basically your armor is worse as well actually, because the turret on the i7 can be penned in the cheeks, whereas the IS-4 turret is unpennable. So that's the reason I have the 113 ahead of the i7. And the i7 kind of goes at the bottom of A tier here for me as well. Moving on to the next heavy tank here. I think the last heavy tank I'm going to choose here would be the BZ here. BZ is a very situational tank. The one thing going for it though is the Hesh. It has really high, like it basically is a chieftain with 600 alpha is basically what this tank is. So again, against like face hugging MLEs or something, the BZ is going to suck. It's really going to suck. But if you play it correctly, kind of like a chieftain in the back of the map, almost as a tank destroyer, almost, you know, the Hesh gun on this thing, like the 152mm, can actually be pretty useful because it can Hesh the side of the MLE, it can Hesh the, you know, the turret of the MLE as well, actually, the cupola. It can Hesh the side of just about any tank. It can Hesh the lower plate of a lot of tanks too. So BZ75 is a pretty good tank, and when you do get some like nice Hesh shots there, you can roll up to like 1000 damage, I think, with the Hesh on a BZ75. So the max roll is 1000 damage, which is basically a 1A3 shot at that point, you know, on a heavy tank. So in my opinion, that's the only reason it goes into A tier. Very good tank. It's basically a 60 TP that's a little bit worse armor, but it has much more like, you know, potential to do damage if you're farming tanks that can be heshed on the side and stuff, you know. But the 60TP, the reason I have the 60TP ahead of it is because 60TP is more versatile and more hull down, and 60TP can just pen stuff in front of it. Whereas this thing, if it runs into a, you know, a super heavy or just a heavy that it just can't pen with AP normally, it won't really be able to do anything at all actually against it, you know. So that's the reason it kind of goes at the bottom of A tier for me. I think with that in mind though, that is basically all the heavy tanks that I would put into A tier. Let's move on to the tank destroyers here. Now, first tank destroyer I would put ahead here would be the Chinese 113 GFT. Basically, this thing used to be super meta. It was like a couple seasons ago. It was like the, you know, the meta. Basically, every team had to run like 6 of these things. Basically, it had reactive armor, was the best tank in the game, and it's basically unpennable upper plate essentially. So everything below the lower plate is, you know, or everything above the lower plate, I mean, is unpennable. So it's basically a hull down beast, and that's the reason this tank is still a very good tank in my opinion. I would still put it like near the top of A tier. It's basically a Ho-Re, just the only difference is the Ho-Re has reactive and this thing doesn't. That's really the only difference, guys. And reactive armor also makes a huge difference. But other than that, this tank is, again, it's very similar to the 60TP, how it has all the right characteristics to be a very S tier tank. Just the fact that it's missing like the consumables on it, and it also got nerfed a little bit for its like mobility as well. Kind of ruins the tank a little bit in my opinion, but still a very good tank. And for sure you can, like a good player will make good use of this WZ 113 GFT for sure. So I'm gonna put it near kind of like the, for me this is like the top of A tier a little bit, but yeah, for sure the best TD in A tier in my opinion. Moving down to the next TD, the next one for me was going to be the T110E4. T110E4 basically has, it does basically the same things that the GFT does, except it has a turret and it has more DPM than the 113 GFT. So the E4 has a really good DPM, and it also has a lot of hit points too for a tank destroyer. So it has, I think, over 2,000 hit points, which is a lot. That's as if you're running the sandbags on it, obviously. But yeah, overall, E4 is a very good TD. In my opinion, don't really play this tank like a TD. It's more of a heavy tank. I mean, there's not much I can compare it to, but I think if I had to compare it to like a heavy tank, I would say it's probably kind of similar to a 60TP. You play this E4 basically the same way you play a 60TP. Just the only difference on the E4 is, again, it shoots APCR standard, which is really bad, and the reverse speed on the E4 is really bad. Now, one thing that the 60TP does have that's really good about it is reverse speed. So basically, you get a big alpha nuke, then you back off quickly before the enemy is able to shoot you. With the E4, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to get a big alpha shot, and you're going to back up, and most likely, they will be able to hit you back. You also do have a bit of a cupola on the top of your tank there, so it's not as hull down as a 60TP would be. So that's kind of the reason why it's a little bit towards the bottom of A tier, but still a very good tank, and the DPM alone makes it a pretty competitive tank. Basically, in any 1v1 fight, the E4 will actually clap, you know, just because it has good DPM. So yeah, that's my ranking for that one. And also has pretty decent armor as well. Now, speaking of DPM, the very next tank I'm going to put in here is the XM. Again, basically, XM has crazy high DPM. It is a lot more hull down than the E4 is. However, it's not impervious, and it can be penned. Now, the one thing the XM has over the E4 is reverse speed. This thing has insane reverse speed, very underrated reverse speed. But the only problem, again, with this tank is just it's a very low alpha gun, guys, and it shoots APCR standard, which also kind of sucks. So for me, I am, you know, I really do like this tank. I think if this tank had slightly higher alpha, it would be like really good. Even if it had the same alpha as like a Minotaur or something, it would be really good. However, it does have like 410 alpha, which is like, honestly, it's basically like a heavy tank alpha. So basically, this thing is a heavy tank. It's essentially a, you know, like, let's say it's an E6 essentially, with the amount of DPM it has. It's around like an E6. It has more DPM than an E6, but it's pretty similar to an E6 playstyle wise, just with less hit points and less mobility going forward as well. But other than that, still a very good TD. Definitely put it in A tier. For pub games in some positions, you can really use a gun depression here and make good use of it. Overall, solid tank, I would say. Very worthy of A tier. Moving on to the next A tier TD here, I am going to put the Foch 155. Now, Foch 155 does have a speed boost and a tungsten, which is honestly the only reason I would put it in A tier. Now, the one thing about the Foch that kind of sucks is the fact that, you know, first of all, you have all this armor, but you can't really use it as a good player. Good players will easily pen you with heat. You do have a massive cupola as well, so you can never be hauled down, like, you know, compared to like a 113 GFT or something. 113 GFT can just haul down snipe you, whereas a Foch is not going to ever be able to be hauled down. If you're shooting a heavy tank with a Foch, you're always going to be exposing that big ass cupola that you have at the top of your tank, and it's just very easy to pen. So apart from that though, the Foch can sometimes be really useful, especially for killing medium tanks. just again, the thing is the Foch is just, you know, it's one of those ones I would put at the bottom of A tier for me. It does have a nice clip and stuff, but it's very situational, and against good players who know what they're doing, the Foch isn't really usable, to be honest. It just will get focused out too quickly, and at the same time, you know, it really kind of struggles to, you know, hold its ground against like other heavies, to be fair. Like other heavies will just always kill you, you know, in a 1v1 situation, because again, they also have reactive, and as I mentioned, Foch with the auto loading gun, basically, yeah, you're forced to dump your clip into a reactive armor tank like an Emily, which, you know, an Emily will gladly take those 2 shots you put into him while he has reactive, and he'll just put like 3 more into you before you can even shoot him a 3rd time, right? So yeah, by that point you're basically already low HP. You do have very low hit points, and you know, the Foch as well is pretty easy to pen in general everywhere. So in my opinion, bottom of A tier for me, but it's still a pretty good tank. The very next tank after the Foch for me would be the 268. And I think that's going to be the last tank for A tier for me. 268 for me, it is a very good tank. Just the only thing that kind of sucks for it is the fact that it has like the heat pen isn't the best, to be fair. So the Hori, for example, the 268 for me would be where the Hori is in the S tier. First of all, if it had reactive, which obviously would make it S tier for me right now, actually. But the only thing about the 268 that kind of sucks compared to Hori is the fact that you have heat, and you don't have the highest penetration heat. I mean, you do have like really high penetration heat, but I mean, to be honest, you can't really use it as much against like tanks that are hulled down like an MLE. You're not going to be able to pen his turret. I mean, you know, a Kron, even I think a Kron, if he's angling correctly, you won't really be able to pen him either with heat, whereas a Hori can just butter through a Kron with the AP pen. But 268 is still a very good tank. I mean, to be honest, the only thing that's not making it an S tier is the fact it doesn't have reactive armor or any like special consumable, but still it has like really good camo rating, similar to the Hori, which helps it be a very effective tank destroyer. But other than that, still kind of, you know, like for me, I would put this, to be honest, I would put this actually ahead of the Foch in my opinion, but or maybe even ahead of the XM. Yeah, like this. That's kind of my opinion for the TD. It's a very good TD, but it just kind of like, you know, it just gets the big alpha shot. It has really nice alpha, but after that one shot you get, once you're spotted, you know, people aren't really going to peek you anymore. They're going to be more aware of you, and you know, you also don't really have the hit points to really win like a 1 versus 1 duel, to be honest. You know, like you will die pretty quick, to be honest, with the 268. You have only 1900 hit points, and yeah, it's pretty easy to pen everywhere. You can't really rely on any armor, unlike the GFT, which you can actually use the armor a little bit to help you there. So that's my opinion for the 268. I think that's about all the tanks I'm about willing to put in A tier. I think now we're moving on to the B tier, and B tier is going to be more towards pub only focused tanks. So let's go here into B tier. Now, B tier for lights, to be honest, there's not a single light I would put in B tier, actually. I don't think any of them are that good. So we're going to move on to the mediums right away here. First medium I put into B tier here would probably be the KPZ 50T. Now, KPZ has tungsten, so that's like the one thing going for it. However, it does have kind of low alpha and is a very slow tank, to be honest. So in my opinion, the KPZ is like a way worse version of the CS63. That's kind of the reason I have it in the B tier. It's still like decent, but it's like you're kind of getting into the range where, like, you know, you don't really have the best armor anyways. Like, you know, you have a decent armor, you have better armor than most mediums, but against heavy tanks, they're still going to pen you, and against mediums with the heat, they're also going to easily pen your turret too. So like all that armor it has kind of sacrifices the mobility isn't really worth it, in my opinion. I'd rather just be mobile and have, like, you know, better mobility than to have like more armor and slower mobility on a medium tank, especially one with tungsten, where you kind of need that mobility to be able to use it to, you know, like kill other mediums, I guess, faster than you know, before their heavies can show up. And so that's kind of my opinion of the KPZ. That's kind of why I have it. It's still a very good tank. At probably best like medium of B tier for sure, but in my opinion, yeah, it's just not as good as the other ones in A tier. Now moving on, next one I would put here, bit of a controversial one, but for me, I'm actually going to put the 140. The 140, yeah, zero armor basically. The 140 is basically a leopard. It's zero armor. It just no armor at all to speak of. However, the one thing going for the 140 is the gun. It has really good DPM and also has a pretty accurate gun as well. So that gun can actually like really help you. And in a DPM fight versus other mediums, I think the 140 can actually do a really good job. It's a very good tank in general. I have had like a lot of success playing it. In pubs at least. This isn't really in tournaments. Obviously 140 is going to get clapped by a T22 or something, but 140 is still a pretty good tank, I think. And yeah, for pubs I think it's a pretty solid tank. The DPM really is the only thing going for it, and the accuracy on the gun, that's the only thing you have really going for you. I mean, a lot of people would have rated the 140 higher than the T62, but for me, I would value actually the armor on the T62 way more than the armor or the DPM on the 140. So that's kind of my rating for it. Yeah, I think a lot of people might disagree with this one, but that's kind of my personal rating for it. Now, right after the 140, I think I would put the TVP here. TVP is basically a worse version of the Bat Chat. It's basically a Bat Chat, guys. TVP is essentially a Bat Chat, just it's not a light tank. It doesn't have light tank characteristics, doesn't have light tank view range, doesn't have light tank camo. It's just, yeah, that's the only problem with the TVP. And it's a lot bigger as well. It gets HE'd in the side like very easily. Very like large profile compared to a Bat Chat, which is much smaller profile. And the Bat Chat also has Spall Liner, by the way, so this does not have it. So against big alpha tanks, I mean, just about everything will be able to HE it. Even other mediums are able to HE your side pretty easily too. So at TVP, you know, the reason I have it in B tier is because the clip can be really useful in some situations, especially in a brawl situation. But to be honest, in a 1v1 situation, the TVP kind of like it just eats shit, to be honest. It's kind of not that good. It's not really able to hold its ground. It's not like a Caro where it's an auto reloader at least, so you can at least load more shells. With the TVP, you're gonna have to dump your entire clip into a fully reactive armor tank or whatever, and basically, yeah, you're useless for the next 20 seconds. Whereas a Caro is always threatening. You never know when he's gonna shoot his next shot. And the armor as well in the Caro is much better. So in my opinion, TVP is just a worse version of Bat Chat, worse version of the Caro. You know, rightfully so in my opinion. Like on the end of B tier here. Moving on, very next tank here would be the Lion for me. The Lion is, to be honest, it's very similar to the Progetto and the Caro. It's just, I think the Lion is just slow. And to be honest, I don't really have the Lion, so I don't think I really have, like, a lot of room to judge it, to be fair. I have not really played it at all, actually. The only thing I can say is that I played against it, and the Lion is pretty slow. And the armor on the Lion is not as good as the armor on the Progetto or the Caro either. So in my opinion, Lion kind of goes at the end of B tier here, but do take this with a big grain of salt. I don't have this tank. I'm just kind of judging it based on what I've seen, but I could be completely wrong. So, I mean, this is kind of just an outlier in my opinion. Don't take it too seriously. Moving on to the next tank here. Very next one I would put after the Lion would be the 907. Now, the 907 overall is a really good tank. Just the only issue with the 907 is that it doesn't do anything that good. Like, it's not a very amazing medium, and it's not a very good light tank, even though it has characteristics from both of them. So it has the tracer shells of the T100, which is like a light tank characteristic, but then it has like medium tank mobility, which is like, it's still decent, you know, it has very good mobility. It's almost like a light tank mobility, but it's against other mediums, you know, it will just get clapped, to be honest. Like by E50 or any tank with reactive will just destroy this tank by DPM. I mean, the 907 doesn't have the highest DPM, but it does have a pretty nice gun. It's essentially like a 140 with tracer shells. So to be honest, I think actually with the 907, I might switch it with the 140. I think I'm going to put the 140. Yeah, I think I'm going to put KPZ. And we'll leave the 140 behind the 907, I think, in my opinion. 907 is probably a better version of the 140. 907 just does have the tracer shells, which can be useful, but like the 140 has like the better gun overall and more DPM in general. But 907 is still pretty good. They're both pretty much the same speed. The 907 does have slightly more armor, although it's like not that much, so you're not really going to be able to bounce anything. Like, expect to be penned all the time here with the 907. But other than that, still a pretty solid tank. It is a good tank for pubs for sure, but for tournaments just not so much. And I don't really see why you would use this tank when you have so many other options. I mean, at T22 is like, we'll clap this thing in a 1v1. You know, even a light tank. I mean, why don't you just play a light tank if you want the tracer shells, right? So I don't really see why you would use a 907. That's kind of why it goes at the bottom of B tier. It does a lot of things pretty well, but it just doesn't do anything perfect. That's kind of like the way I see it, you know. So moving on to the next pick here, I think the very next tank after the Lion I would choose would be probably the M60 here. M60, it's basically a Patton without reactive armor, and the speed boost on the M60, to be honest, the M60 is so slow anyways that the speed boost doesn't really make a big difference on it. It basically goes the same speed as like another medium. So the T62, for example, though, it actually, the speed boost does make a big difference on it. Same with the 121B, but the M60 is already slow as fuck that like even the speed boost doesn't really like change anything. It's still going to be kind of like get to the same position at the same time. Only difference, it's missing reactive. So for me, it kind of goes at the bottom of B tier here. I don't see why you would run an M60 when you have the M48 Patton. It's just a better version overall. Yeah, sure, this is a little bit faster, but like, is that like extra bit of speed worth it? Definitely not, in my opinion. So it kind of goes at the bottom of B tier for me. With that in mind, the very next tank I would put after it would be the 30B. Now, 30B for me, again, it's basically like a Leopard with gun depression. But other than that, it just doesn't do anything that well. You know, it's kind of the same, it's in the same position as a 907 basically. It has like light tank characteristics, it's fast, it has like decent gun depression, but you know, it just doesn't have the, you know, like the characteristics of a light tank. It doesn't have camo, it doesn't have spotting. It has a massive fucking cupola on the top of it too. So like that cupola is basically gonna make trading with any other medium tank like really badly. You know, like an STB will destroy a 30B because the cupola on the STB is much smaller than the 30B cupola, right? And then the 30B cupola just kind of kills the tank, to be honest. I think if this tank didn't have a cupola, it would actually be a little bit more competitive, although it wouldn't be that much more. It would basically be like an STB in my opinion if it didn't have a cupola. But yeah, just the fact that it has a massive cupola kind of makes it hard to make this tank worth it. You know, I don't really know why you would use this tank when you have an STB, when you have like, I mean, if you want gun depression, you run the M48 patent. Basically, M48 patent will destroy this tank in a 1v1. So, in my opinion, I don't see why you would use a 30B. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit faster, but if you really care about speed, I mean, why not just run a light tank or even a Leopard, with much more DPM as well. The 30B does not have good DPM at all. So, in my opinion, end of B tier for me. And yeah, that's it for the mediums. I'm gonna move on to the heavies here. Now, the very next heavy tank I'm gonna put on to B tier. Top of B tier for me would be a VK90. VK90, it's a super heavy, which means that mobility is kind of like something you have to deal with. It's very slow mobility wise, but to be honest, VK90 is the best armored super heavy in the game. Side scraping VK90 is probably the hardest thing to pen. The only thing you can really pen on the VK90 is like maybe the cheek of the turret there. Like there's a little tiny like gap in the cheek there that you can pen. But even then, it's still a pretty hard pen, and like most tanks don't have the penetration to pen it anyways. Like, you know, like some tanks can pen it, but most of them won't really have like the ability to do that. So VK90 for me goes top of B tier. The only reason the VK90 is not like higher up is again because it's super heavy. And in this meta, there's just no reason, to be honest, to run a VK90 when you have the MLE, because the MLE is basically reactive armor. It's faster than VK90. It has more hit points than VK90. Similar armor, to be honest, as a VK90. It's not like the VK90 can like really like out trade an MLE, and an MLE has enough heat pen to be able to pen a side scraping VK90. So basically, I don't really know why I'd use a VK90. The only reason you'd use it is in pubs. VK90 gets some other tanks can actually like really be really good, to be honest. Like a VK90 versus an IS7 would destroy an IS7. You know, the IS7 cannot even pen it. Against a BZ would destroy it as well. Like the VK90 is still a very good tank. It's just it's very limited, and you really need to play it in very specific situations to make the most out of it. But again, if you ever have to push with this thing, or if you have to make a play, or you have to rotate, this thing is the slowest thing ever. It's a super heavy. You're never going to be able to do it, and you don't really have enough hit points to push in and take the shots anyways. You know, you only have like 2400 hit points too, so it's kind of like not the, you know, not ideal for anything other than holding a specific position and hoping the enemy comes and pushes you. But in my opinion, I mean, I think a Type 71 would just be better at doing that than a VK90 basically. Type 71 has a better gun and similar armor, to be honest, and just it has a forward-facing turret, which makes it better than a rear-mounted turret, in my opinion. So that's kind of my verdict on VK90. Still a very good tank, probably the best super heavy in the game for me. Just, you know, just the fact that super heavies though are not really meta in this time, though that's like the main thing. I just don't see why you'd run a super heavy again when you have an MLE that just has more hit points than you and is faster than you as well. So, and basically the same DPM as you too. So no matter what, I mean, I just don't see how it's worth it to run a VK90. Anyways, moving on from VK90 here, the very next tank I'm going to put on is going to be the M6CO. M6CO, again, it's an autoloader, so it kind of gets countered by reactive, but the two-shot gun on this thing can really be punishing, and it can actually be pretty useful in some situations. There is some like certain nuke positions you can take, especially like on canal or something. Like on canal, like a long range nuke shot, you know, you also have the aim consumable, so it's basically like a cron, but it has 900 alpha in 2 shots, which are, you know, 1 second interclip basically. So Yo is very good. Just the problem again with the Yo is it's kind of like in a meta where reactive armor counters everything that you do. Again, if you're shooting an Emily with reactive armor in a Cabral or whatever, yeah, you'll put 2 shots into him. Okay, he'll use his reactive armor, then he'll just put like 4 shots into you before you can even like reload or whatever, you know. So in my opinion, I don't really see why this would be a good tank. It is good tank in some situation, but again, super situational is kind of similar to a VK90, you know. But it's just, yeah, like there's not a whole lot you can do with it. I don't know why you'd use this tank when you have like the E6, which is much more mobile, you know, like the Super Kong, which has reactive. There's nothing really going for this tank apart from the 2-shot gun. And even then, the 2-shot gun is pretty low DPM, and this meta, like with reactive armor, DPM is really important, you know. So if you have a low DPM tank without any like special consumable to make up for it, it kind of just sucks in my opinion. So Yo for me is at the bottom of the B tier, not really the best heavy, but it's not really the worst either. You can still make it work in some situations, especially in pubs as well. Now moving on to the very next tank here. Very next tank I would put on is the E5 right after the Yo. E5 is, to be honest, a pretty good tank. It's just the problem with the E5 is that it's a worse version of the Concept 1B. The E5, like, the turret is good, but it does have a cupola on the turret, and this cupola can be penned, and good players will pen you. So in my opinion, I don't really think the E5 is that good. I mean, you do have gun depression, but you are much bigger than the Concept. So the Concept overall has better armor than you do, and basically similar gun, although the E5 gun is much better in my opinion. It does shoot AP standard, which is much more better than the APCR standard of the Concept, but again, the tank is just too big. It just, you know, it's still a pretty good tank. It just, I don't know why you'd use this tank. I mean, what's the point of it? First of all, this tank, like, if this tank had like Hesh or something, then maybe it would make sense to put it where the Chieftain is, but it doesn't have Hesh, and it just has, like, it's just, you're just trading heat shots basically, and everything that you shoot is basically going to be able to pen you back, especially because your lower plate is pretty bad. Now, one thing as well about the E5 that really sucks is the sides. The sides are super easy to HE. I mean, even big alpha tank destroyers can HE you in the side. 215B, any Hesh gun will also HE you pretty easily. So in a brawl setting, the E5 just kind of sucks. But overall, still a good tank. If you're able to play hull down with it, it can be used. It's not a bad tank at all. It's just slower than a Concept basically, and less hull down than a Concept, but still a pretty good tank overall. So that's why it goes into B tier for me. After the E5, I'm gonna put the 5A in here as well. Now 5A, I would actually put it, yeah, like, I don't know why it's doing this behind the E5. There we go. Yeah, 5A would be here. Basically, the 5A is most similar to an IS-7. It's like a Chinese IS-7 essentially. The only difference on the 5A though is the armor. The armor on the 5A is not troll at all, pretty easy to pen. The IS-7 has much more troll armor, much harder to pen, and also has tungsten, which kind of makes it like able to kind of just push in, take the shots, and get some damage out. The 5A, however, you're not really able to just push in like that. You don't have the armor, you don't really have the hit points, and yeah, you do have a better gun than the IS-7 overall, but it's like the gun is, you know, it's kind of like, the best way to describe the 5A, in my opinion, it's a worse version of the 113, essentially. That's kind of the way it is. You have to kind of wait for the enemy to push into you, and even then, you're not really that hull down. The 113 is more hull down, more armor. The 5A is just much more easy to pen, and yeah, I don't really see the point of using it. It is a good tank overall, has good DPM, but the DPM is not really worth it compared, like, you know, the 113 has better DPM anyways, and better armor, so I don't know why you'd use a 5A when you have the 113, but still a pretty good tank. It's in B tier for me for that reason. Not a bad tank at all, just, there's much better options than running it in general. Right after 5A, I'm going to put the 260 in here as well. Now 260, again, it's a very mobile heavy. It's most similar to the E6. The only difference is, again, 260 shoots standard APCR, which sucks. And the one thing about the 260 as well is it doesn't have gun depression, and that also kind of sucks. So again, 260 is a good tank. It's just like the E6 is a much better tank than the 260. I don't know why you would ever use a 260 when you have the E6. E6 basically does everything a 260 does, but better. So in my opinion, 260 goes behind the 5A here. It's still a good tank. It's just not that good in my opinion. It doesn't do anything that well. It is very mobile, so it can like work against mediums. Like if you're trying to kill medium tanks, it is pretty fast, but so is an E6 to be honest. And the E6 armor is even more troll than the 260 armor. So that's kind of my verdict on it. It's still a good tank, but yeah, it just doesn't do anything that well. And I think that's kind of like the theme of the B tier tanks here. A lot of these tanks are pretty good. There's better options in them, you know. So that's kind of why they're in B tier. And that's kind of how I made my tier list as well. Now moving on to after the 260, the very next tank for me would be Object 777. Again, this tank is actually more comparable to a 113. The only difference is that this tank this tank reverses. This tank has like the worst reverse speed ever. Basically, imagine a 113 with like shitty reverse speed. That's basically what this tank is. And again, I don't really see why would you use this tank when you have the 113? The 113 is just a better tank in general. You can see on the turret here, it's also a turret in the middle of the tank basically. So it's not like a super front facing turret. And I mean, the modules in this tank are also not the best. It gets ammo pretty easily as well on the side there. So in my opinion, it's a decent tank. The only thing going for this tank is the fact it's super low profile. And there's some positions that you can maybe play that, you know, other tanks wouldn't really be able to play, but other than that, I don't see why I'd use it. And the fact that it has such bad reverse speed, I think the reverse speed is like the biggest killer of this tank here. So that's why this tank goes into B tier. Other than that, if this tank had like better reverse speed, I think this tank would actually go into A tier. It'd be like right behind the IO-113 in my opinion, maybe even ahead of it because it has slightly better armor. But like, yeah, other than that, I don't see why. Yeah, like there's just no reason to run this tank when you have the 113. Moving on from this tank, the very next tank I'm going to put in here is the T-57 Heavy. Again, you'll notice kind of a trend with these two tanks here. Both of them have horrible reverse speed. Now, T-57 would be a really good tank. It's a good tank in general, to be honest. It has a really nice clip. The gun is pretty nice. Just the only problem is the reverse speed. It reverses so poorly that it kind of suffers. Like basically, you get 3 shots with this thing, right? And 3 shots in the clip. And again, as I said, autoloaders in this meta are not the best because you have reactive armor, which kind of completely counters autoloaders, right? But even without that, like this 57, you know, you get your 3 shots off, and then you have to back up super slow. Basically, by the time you back up, you're probably going to take like 1 or 2 shots in return. So you're not really winning the trade that much, and the fact that you're autoloader in the reactive meta, in my opinion, makes this tank not the best tank ever. For me, like a 50B, like, you know, the 57 is kind of similar to a 50B, just the 50B is much more mobile. That's the only difference. 57 has more armor, which is like, actually the armor is pretty troll in this thing. A lot of times you will get bounces on it, but it's not troll to the point where like a good player won't be able to easily pen you, you know, like it's still a pretty easy pen, and it's just super slow. And I don't see why you would use this tank when you have a 50B with reactive. But this tank does not have reactive, does not have anything. It does have the shell interclip boost, which is kind of nice, but you know, I mean, still, it's just the reverse speed really sucks on it so bad that it's the main reason I put it in B tier. Although, to be honest, I wish if this thing had slightly better reverse speed, I would even put it in top of A tier. It is a very good tank in general, good armor. It's just the reverse speed really kills it, in my opinion. So that's kind of why I put it so far behind. Alrighty, now moving on to the next tank. I'm going to put the SGRV in here. SGRV has good DPM, just shit armor, and pretty slow as well in general compared to like what it used to be. In its meta, in its prime, the SGRV was a S tier tank for sure. This used to be a tournament meta tank. It had the speed boost back then, and the turret was much more stronger. That made the tank pretty much meta because it had like medium tank DPM with medium tank mobility on heavy tank hit points, which is, you know, was pretty broken at the time. However, I mean, to be honest, again, in this meta, you have tanks like the E50 with reactive. Reactive on an E50 basically gives you similar hit points as you would have on an SGRV anyways, to be honest. So in my opinion, I don't really see again why you would like run the SGRV. It's kind of like a bad E6 basically. Like the E6 is a better version of the SGRV. E6 is much faster, bigger alpha, and much more armor as well, to be honest. And also like the gun is like more accurate than an SGRV gun. SGRV shoots APCR as its premium. The E6 shoots heat as its premium, which heat is much better than APCR. So yeah, I don't know why I'd run this thing, but it's still a pretty decent tank. It used to be really good, but now it's just kind of fallen off completely. It's nowhere near the meta anymore, and yeah, that's kind of my verdict on it. I think in terms of B tier tanks, I think the last tank I'm going to put for heavy tanks here is going to be the 114 SB2. Basically a worse version of 60 TP, however, it does have AP standard, which is kind of nice, but not really enough to make up for the lack of armor that this thing has. This thing has no armor at all. Basically, it has horrible reverse speed as well, so the 60 TP is just better than it in every way. So I don't really know why I'd use this thing, to be honest. It's kind of nice overall because of the gun. The gun for me is better on this thing than the gun on the 60, but it doesn't really make up for the fact that it's super slow backing up, super slow going anywhere actually. Like the 60 TP is faster anyways. And yeah, like the armor also, it's not hull down either. It does have a cupola on this tank, so even when you think you're hull down, you still get penned pretty easily too. So in my opinion, low B tier for the 114 SB2. Not really a good tank in my opinion. And yeah, now moving on, I think that's the last of the heavy tanks. Moving on to tank destroyers here. First one I'm going to put in here is the FV183 here. Now 215B FV183 is very good. The main thing that makes this tank somewhat like good is the hesh. And as I said, this is a reactive meta here, so anything that can be heshed is pretty strong. Hesh kind of counters reactive, and so 183, in my opinion, it's a very hard tank to play, but in the right hands of a player that knows how to use it, it can be pretty good. But this thing will suffer in pubs quite a bit because like if you have a bad team or something and you have to move or something, you're just a very unflexible tank. So in my opinion, this thing is at the very bottom of B tier. It's still the only thing going for it is the fact that it has hesh and has a pretty big alpha gun, and these two things can kind of like counter the MLE spam a little bit sometimes, but still like it doesn't really make up for it. It's still a very kind of weaker side of the B tier in my opinion. I wouldn't really recommend it too much, but it's still a pretty decent tank, and you can get some pretty nice nukes off of it with it, you know. But it just basically all you got to do is expect a second you shoot and you get spotted. Any team's just going to YOLO you with reactive essentially, and you know there's not much you can really do. And a good player obviously isn't really going to be able to give you those kind of shots a whole lot. You know, you're going to maybe splash him once with hesh or something, maybe even pen him with AP. But you know, after that, once he knows where you are, if he has a better tank than you, it's not much you can really do in a 183. He can just avoid you the whole time. And again, you have pretty bad camo as well for a TD, which is also a big reason why this thing is pretty weak, to be honest. But only thing going for it is a gun in my opinion. Now moving on, very next tank I would put right behind the 183 would be the 4005. Now the 4K5 is basically a 50B without reactive and less hit points as well. but you know, it's still a very good tank. But it's like, yeah, not having reactive, not having hit points kind of limits the way you're able to use this tank. It does have a speed boost, but to be honest, the 50B is still faster than you, even with the speed boost actually. So I don't really see why you'd use this tank. It's basically like you're forced to play this tank as like a heavy tank, not really a tank destroyer, because you know the clip that you have, you're not able to just sit in the back of the map and snipe with a 4-shot clip. You know, like the gun isn't going to do anything at that range. This tank is the only way you can really make use of this tank is if you just YOLO a medium tank right away and try to kill him early on with the speed boost. But other than that, I really don't see why you'd use this thing. It's for me, it's just bad in every way. I don't really like it at all. Even the 183 for me is more useful than the 4005 because at least the 183 you get a pretty big nuke off and you have like more camping potential, whereas this thing has no camping potential whatsoever. You kind of have to frontline with this thing, and this thing with no armor, whether frontlining is kind of just pretty bad way to play a tank destroyer in my opinion. So that's kind of my reasoning for that one. Very next tank after that would be the Badger. Badger does have armor, but to be honest, it's just the armor, it could still be pen in the front. It's basically like a, you know, the problem with the Badger is that it's like, it's essentially a 113 GFT with lower alpha gun, and the gun is worse as well. I think it shoots APCR standard as well, which is pretty bad. So, in my opinion, it's a pretty decent tank to be honest. I mean, honestly, it might even be better than the 4005, but it's like not a big difference between those two tanks. They're completely different playstyles. One of them just play hull down and just like, you know, like trade with the enemy, which can be good. But again, this thing is super unflexible. You are, you know, turretless TD basically, and yeah, not a whole lot you can do when you have to move around and stuff. But it is kind of more hull down and decently armored than most tank destroyers. But you know, against a good player who knows what he's doing, you can pen the cheeks on this thing pretty easily, especially with the insane heat pen that, you know, most heavy tanks have nowadays. And the whole re will just absolutely clap this thing, by the way, actually. And even in a DPM fight, just the fact it has like reactive, and the whole re will just pen it frontally wherever it shoots at it. Like this thing has 0 armor against a whole re or something, you know. So in my opinion, this thing is only good against maybe like heavy tanks that don't have the penetration to shoot you, but to be honest, the majority of heavy tanks do have the penetration to shoot you, so I don't really know why you would use this, you know. But it's overall a pretty good tank. I would actually, to be honest, probably put this a little bit ahead of the... not really, actually. I'm going to keep it where it is. But yeah, it's still a decent tank, just not as good. Now, moving on, very next tank I would put here is the ET-110 E3. E3, basically, it's an E4 with a bigger alpha gun, and it's a turretless version of it. That's the only problem with it, is it's turretless, and it's super slow, and it does have a speed boost. It has decent gun depression as well, similar to the Badger. It's basically a Badger with bigger alpha, but the DPM on it is so bad that in my opinion, like, it's not really worth using it compared to a Badger. I'd rather use a Badger than an E3 actually, because the Badger, at least you have good DPM, you know, whereas the E3 you have pretty bad DPM and you're slow, which kind of like just ruin it, you know. Like an MLE will gladly eat a shot from the E3, you circle him and get behind him, and what can you do in an E3? You just get HE'd up the ass the whole time. So there's not much you can really do in that situation. It's a good tank if you have good teammates to cover you, but like you do need a lot of cover. And one thing the E3 does have is a massive cupola as well, which can be HE'd. Now this cupola at the top of the tank, yeah, it's not penable with AP, but it can be HE'd for a lot of damage. So if you're playing a hull down position and you're facing like another tank who's also playing a hull down position, you're basically trading HE shots. That's the only thing you could do, because he's not going to be able to pen you, but the HE damage on the cupola is a lot. It's more than the super conk actually. And I said the super conk earlier takes a lot of HE damage. I think like it takes like 200 to 250. The E3 will take almost 300 damage for a cupola shot from an MLE or something. So in my opinion, E3 is kind of just like kind of mid, to be fair, and it has less hit points as well than it, you know. So it's kind of it's one of those tanks that can't really be used for sniping. It's a frontline heavy, which is it classified as a TD technically, but you know, you have to play as a frontline tank, and you know, it just doesn't do anything that well to be a frontline tank. You know, the Badger at least has DPM, so it can kind of frontline tank a little bit and do some damage. The E3, you're basically gonna get like 2 shots off and basically die right after, you know, because you just don't have the mobility to get away from bad situations really. So that's my reason for the E3. Right after the E3, I think in this situation here, I think yeah, I think that's basically all the TDs I'm gonna be able to put in this tier. I mean, yeah, that's about it for me. So let's move on to the C tier. I'm gonna go on to the light tanks for CT here. Now, first light tank I'm gonna put in here is gonna be the Vickers. The Vickers, for me, it's a better option than the Sheridan, because the Vickers at least has DPM. The Sheridan does not have DPM. The Vickers, the reason it's such a low, you know, low rank compared to the other light tanks, that we have like 3 light tanks in S tier here. one in A tier, and then, you know, basically the Vickers is just all by itself in the C tier here with the Sheridan. The reason is it has the Hesh gun only, which again just limits it a lot. You're not able to pen heavies very easily, and even when you are able to pen stuff with Hesh, you're doing very little damage. So like the 4202, for example, if the Vickers had similar Hesh pen as the 4202, it would actually be like really good. But the problem is the Hesh like damage that you get from the 42 is so much higher than the Vickers that I don't see why you would use a Vickers, bro. Like, it doesn't even have the best camo anyways. It has the same kind of armor profile as the 4202, similar speed, although Vickers is like a little bit faster, but 4202 just has a much bigger Hesh output damage than the Vickers does. So I don't, this is why it's at the bottom of CT here. I don't really see why you'd use it. Now Sheridan, on the other hand, has very high alpha, but the DPM is really bad and the accuracy is pretty bad as well, and it does shoot, I think, APCR standard, which also kind of sucks. So Sheridan in general, the main thing for me though, like the main reason Sheridan is pretty bad for me as a light tank is the camo. The Sheridan, in my opinion, has pretty bad camo compared to every other light tank. It gets spotted super easily, so you're never really able to play this tank super passive or in the back of the map where you can get like shots in. Most people will spot you, and your gun is so bad that like you have to take such a long time to aim in, and by the time you've fully aimed in or whatever to guarantee that you're going to pen the guy, he's probably shot you by then. So you've already lost the trade, and you're a light tank essentially, so you don't have the most armor, you don't have any you don't have any hit points to work with, so you're basically losing the trade every time you're shooting Sheridan. Sheridan as well, even against other light tanks, also just gets out DPMs. Like if a Sheridan runs into like a T100, the T100 just claps the Sheridan, man. The T100 will put like almost 3 to 4 shots into a Sheridan before the Sheridan can even reload to shoot him again. Basically, that's how much like the reload on Sheridan is basically, I think it's 14-second reload almost. It's really slow, and a T100 with adrenaline is going to have almost 4 or like a 5-something second reload. You can basically put like 3 shots in with, or 3 to 4 shots with the T100 before the Sheridan can shoot you twice. So in my opinion, Sheridan kind of goes at the bottom here. It's just not good at anything. Doesn't do anything very well. Yeah, it's like the unique thing it has is the light tank with big alpha, but to be honest, if you want big alpha, I think just run the 1-to-1, to be honest. I mean, the 1-to-1 with tungsten is going to shoot the same amount as the Sheridan is going to shoot. It's more accurate, has reactive, I mean, hull down at least armor, so in my opinion, much better than the Sheridan. Moving on from the Sheridan here, I think that's the only, yeah, that's the light tanks left. We've used all the light tank. The only one left here is the medium, and I'm going to put the Murat right behind the Sheridan. Now, the Murat is, you know, the problem with the Murat is that it just sucks against 1v1s versus the other mediums. It has a 2-shot clipper, which is kind of nice, but as I said, clippers are countered by reactive nowadays, so it's even then it's not that good. And in the same time, it's huge. The Murat is massive. It's bigger than, I think it's it's smaller than the E50. It's probably the same size as the M48 pad, basically. It's huge, and it doesn't have any armor. Gets HE'd in the side pretty easily, and it has a 2-shot gun that takes a while to reload. It takes like 14 seconds to reload this gun, which, you know, by that time, if you're in a fight versus any other medium, you basically lost the fight already. And so the Murat, to be honest, is the only useful part of the Murat. The only way you can really like make use of it is like it's good against heavy tanks, maybe if you're like shooting it from a distance, you're getting 2 shots in, reloading, and just hiding and stuff. But again, to be honest, if you have a Murat like trying to do that, why don't you just use a Batchat, which has light tank camo? You know, a Murat, it doesn't have light tank camo, it's a medium tank. So I don't really see why I'd use that. In my opinion, Murat is pretty bad, and honestly, it needs a pretty big buff to make it like somewhat usable. I don't see any reason why you'd use a Murat when you have a Batchat. Even a TVP is more useful. Progetto, like any kind of like autoloader, like more useful than a Murat for sure. I don't see any benefit of running a Murat. It's massive, no armor, has like slight turret armor, but like it's not worth it for the size that you get and the DPM that you have. Now moving on to heavies here. Now you'll see here there's a bit of a trend here. Now in my trend here, any super heavies in general are just pretty bad in this meta. Again, there's no reason to run a mouse, E100 or VK when you have an MLE with the same hit points, just much faster basically than you are. Like the armor on these tanks doesn't matter. Both tanks will be able to pen each other pretty easily. However, the MLE is much faster and higher DPM as well than an E100, a VK, and a mouse. I mean, mouse has similar DPM as the MLE, but it's like, it's so unflexible that I don't see why, you know, the MLE is just better in every way. So with that in mind, I'm going to do my rating for the super heavies here. I'm going to go VK first. VK for me is a little bit better than the E100 just because it has tungsten, and the armor on it is slightly better, even though not that much better, to be honest. So both of them are pretty equal in my opinion. However, the tungsten on this with the big alpha gun is pretty worth it. The thing about the E100 though is the E100 with the big alpha gun is pretty bad. It has an 18-second reload almost, like basically much slower than any other heavy tank. And in the same time, if you run the small gun for the DPM, the small gun can barely pen anything at all. And basically, as an E100, if you're not like in a brawl in the middle of the map and like, you know, where you can use that DPM and the HP that you have, if you're trading hull down and stuff, you're always going to lose the trade hull down because you're not going to be able to pen anybody, and everybody's going to be able to pen you because your turret is pretty easy to pen, right? So yeah, like an E100 versus a Croner example, for example, a Croner is going to destroy an E100. Arena Sorante is going to destroy an E100. IS-4 is going to destroy an E100. 60 TP even will destroy an E100. You know, with the gun that it has. I don't see any reason why the E100 would be good. People thought it would be good with the small gun, but in my opinion, small gun DPM buff doesn't do anything. It's just the fact it's a small gun. Again, you're not going to be able to pen anything, and you know, you just have such a massive profile that you're not really fast enough to use that DPM because the enemy will just be able to avoid you anywhere you go. So if you're trying to push like a heavy side or something, they'll just back off, and by the time you're trying to catch them, you're just taking already 3 shots just to try to cross into the brawl in the first place, right? So in my opinion, again, I don't really see why E100 is useful. That kind of does it for the C tier here. Moving on to the TDs here. I'm gonna put the Grill right here. Again, Grill, it's a good tank in general. It has really good DPM, but the one thing that sucks about the Grill is gun depression, and I really wish this tank had a little bit more gun depression. Not having gun depression makes this tank super useless. It's like you're basically a Hori, essentially. You're a faster Hori with 0 armor, essentially. That's what you are. The gun on the Hori is actually better, has more penetration. Hori has more armor, and the Hori has reactive as well. So like everything on the Hori is much better than the Grill. I don't know why you would use a Grill. The Grill is like mobile, sure, it's a little bit faster than the Hori, but like what are you going to do with the speed? You're not going to be able to fight mediums one-on-one because you don't have a gun depression to hit them, right? If this thing had gun depression like the tier 9 Grill kind of does, like the Waffen or whatever, if it had the gun depression like the tier 9, it would be able to be somewhat usable because it would kind of just be able to just go quickly on the med side, try to like fight the mediums with big alpha, and it would actually be usable, but it doesn't have gun depression. So medium tanks are generally going to be able to avoid you pretty easily. You're not really going to be able to do a whole lot, and it's a very hard tank to play. The only way you play this tank is in the back of the map sniping. You will never be able to do anything else with it, and again, it makes it very unflexible. And in the same time, you know, the Hori can do the same thing, except the Hori, when it gets into a brawl, it's actually useful, whereas the Grill is not useful at all. So that's kind of my reasoning for the Grill being so low on the tier list here. Moving on, I am actually going to put the Minnow here as the second tank behind the Grill. Minnow is basically, it's like a shitty version of the Kron, really. That's kind of what the Minnow is. It has a 3-shot gun, although it has a reserve shell, which you're basically never able to use. The only problem with the Minnow is that if you run into any player who knows how to heat pen you, your armor is nothing. You're basically like the worst version of the Kron you possibly could be. First of all, you look like you have good armor, you move super slow, but at the same time, if anybody has heat and they shoot you with heat, like an MLE will easily pen the Minnow anywhere with heat on the turret. Like the Minnow is not hull down at all. You know, no matter how hull down he thinks he is, it will just go through. And you have less hit points. Well, you have only 2,000 hit points or 1,900 or whatever it is. So it's not even that much hit points. And the gun on the Minnow also sucks. It shoots APCR standard and also is very inaccurate gun in general. So the Minnow, you can't even play as a TD. You have to play, it's like one of those tanks where you have to play as a front line, except you're super slow, so you can't even catch off medium tanks as a front line. And if you try to brawl heavy tanks with it, heavy tanks are just going to out-trade you and you're going to lose the trade in general. So Minotaur is essentially kind of like a 4005. Imagine a 4005, but like slow. And you know, the only reason the 4005 is in B tier is because 4005 can at least catch mediums off guard and, you know, clip people out early, and that way they'll kind of be, you know, be somewhat useful at least early game. You know, the Minotaur just cannot be useful at all early game. It's too slow to do anything. And by the time it gets there, it's just, yeah, everybody's already in good positions. They're all held down. Not much you can do to, like, you know, what are you going to do? Pen them with what? Your APCR standard, which can't pen anything anyways. It's like the Minnow is really a bad tank, to be honest. It's a good tank against, like, bad players, but as I said, I'm making this tier list, you know, based on the tank's, like, capabilities, like the maximum capacity that the tank could do. And to be honest, the maximum the Minnow can do is just very little, to be honest. There's not much you can do at all. But yeah, moving on, I think the very next thing I'm going to put here is the Yagi 100. The only thing going for the Yagi 100 is the fact that it has tungsten. In some very, very small maps like Dynasty's Pearl or whatever, you're going to be able to use that, you know, like kind of map to your advantage. It does outtrade heavies in general, so pretty decent, has decent armor. But again, the problem with the Yagi is just super unflexible. You do have a long reload. And I mean, yeah, other than that, I just, again, very unflexible tank. It's basically an E100 with less hit points, but it has tungsten and slightly better DPM. But, you know, in general, like, is it really worth it? Not really, to be honest. A Hori will still, I'd rather take a Hori more than a Yag, because a Hori will be able to put 2 shots into a Yag before the Yag can even reload. and a Hori can just pen the egg anywhere basically. Like all that armor on the egg doesn't matter because it has good armor against like, you know, maybe mediums, but like the lower plate is so easily to pen, and the upper structure here is pretty easy to pen as well. And by the way, it does have a cupola, so even medium tanks who can't pen the upper plate here, or the upper structure, I mean, like will be able to shoot the cupola, and you're not going to be able to do anything against them. So in my opinion, the egg is pretty mid as well. We're kind of nearing the edge of the trash section, the sad section, you know. But yeah, that's my rating for now, and let's move on to the next one here. So the only tanks left here is the Mouse, the Waffen, the 263, and the 116. Now, the 116, to be honest, I am going to put it in D tier here. I don't have this tank, so again, take this with a huge grain of salt. It's similar to the Lion where I don't have it either. So these two tanks I don't have, so I don't really know what to say based on experience, but everybody else seems to say they're pretty bad tanks. And I know, although the 116 does have reactive, which like kind of, to be honest, like based on the fact it has reactive, I kind of feel like it would be like top of B tier somewhat because of that. But I don't have the tank. I've never played it. I've never even seen it been played that much, so I can't really say much about it. So honestly, it doesn't really make sense for me to even rate this tank. I'm going to leave it out of the ratings. But I saw a lot of people putting it in D tier, so I'm just going to assume that's where it belongs. But in general, I can't really say anything myself about that. Now, moving on, top of D tier is going to be the Mouse. Mouse is basically a shitty version of the E100. Now, E100 is like, as DPM, the gun is more accurate. The Mouse, the gun is inaccurate. Yeah, it does have more armor, more HP, but again, it's a Mouse, man. And a Mouse with this kind of gun, it's kind of forced to run the small gun. At least on the E100, you can run the big gun. And to be honest, the big gun on the E100 is more useful than the small gun because at least you can HE splash people. On the small gun, you can't HE splash anything. You're not going to do shit. Wherever you go, you're out-traded, basically. And again, you're going to have to fight MLEs, which can just circle around you. I mean, an MLE, all that armor on a Mouse, the MLE will just be able to pen the upper plate of the Mouse with heat, like no problem at all, you know. So it's like, I don't really see, again, Mouse is just a super unflexible version of the MLE. Yeah, it has similar hit points as the MLE. Yeah, it has similar gun as the MLE, but like everything else about it is just sucks. Horrible speed, basically no armor, essentially, even though you're like have the most armor in the game, but everything can basically pen you. You don't have any like super hard to pen positions, and yeah, a Mouse, I just don't see why it's even worth it. It's very bad. Right after the Mouse here, I'm going to put the Waffen right after it. Waffen, I did play this tank and test it a little bit, so I do have a little bit of experience in it. I obviously can't talk about it, but it is released now, so I kind of have some like experience playing it, so I can talk about it a little bit more than 116 and the Lion here. But for me, the Waffen is it's kind of like a worse version of the 4005. At least the 4005, it's like smaller, and the turret in the 4000 is in the front. So in the front means like when you're trying to push the medium side or whatever, trying to catch somebody off guard with the medium side, at least you're able to kind of like get your clip off much easier than a Waffen can. A Waffen has to like fully extend his entire like hull or whatever, like because it's a rear mounted tank basically. So you have to like really fully peek every single time you're about to shoot somebody. And I mean, apart from that, like then you have like a massive reload, which is even worse than the 4005 reload. And on top of that, you also don't have HE like spall liner. You get HE everywhere. You know, it doesn't have spall liner. The 4005 does have spall liner. So in my opinion, Waffen is, yeah, pretty trash at everything. The only thing it's like decent at is doing damage, but like at the cost of what, man? You're gonna die the second you peek. You know, you're probably not gonna even have time to shoot all your shots before you die. So I just don't, again, I don't really see why this tank is even useful. The funny part is it's one of the most expensive tanks in the game too. Like it was super hard to get. You have to gamble like really rare crates to get it, and even then it's like a horrible tank. So in my opinion, I don't like it at all. Now, very next year, I'm going to put 263. Now, 263, to be honest, I think I'm being a little harsh on it, but here's the reality of 263. It has good armor. It's pretty fast, but the biggest problem with 263 is the gun arc and the fact it has 0 gun depression. So basically, if you're pushing a medium side and you have 0 gun depression, it's going to be hard for you to actually shoot medium tanks, especially just like any kind of hill in front of you. Like you're really not able to do much. And the thing is, you have good armor until you're facing a heavy tank with good DPM. Or good penetration, I mean. So all that armor in the upper structure here, it can be penned pretty easily. There is like a little bit of a line here where my mouse is. They can easily pen in a face hug. So 263 in general, it doesn't do anything that well. And the one thing that really sucks about it, like two things that suck about it, again, standard APCR as a premium, as a like, you know, ammunition type, and also on top of that, it's like really low alpha gun. It's a 460 alpha gun, guys. So basically the same alpha as a mouse, same alpha as an MLE. Except you're turretless. You have no gun arc, which means like if you try to move your tank slightly to the left or try to shoot slightly to your left, you have to move your whole tank to do that. And moving your whole tank to do that resets your entire like dispersion or whatever. You know, it's like it basically counts as on the move at that point. You're not really aimed in anymore. And again, all that for a 460 alpha shot, like you're probably going to get shot in return. And also the fact, look at the gun, by the way, the gun is in the back of the tank. So anytime you're trying to push somebody, you basically have to expose the entire front half of your tank. And by that time, you've already, like, you know, you're going to lose the trade no matter what you do with a 263. I don't see how you win the trade. The only way the 263 kind of works out, like the way you play it in pubs, is, again, you just have to kind of follow your mediums. You have to let your mediums push in first, and you just kind of follow them because you're fast enough to do that. And other than that, it's kind of okay in that sense, but like I don't see, like, in a 1 versus 1 setting, this thing sucks, man. It's just very bad at everything. There's nothing it does very well. The gun is bad, and the low alpha gun as well. The DPM is good, but, like, you know, for the low alpha that you get, it just doesn't make it worth it for me. And although it's kind of similar to a Badger, like the Badger is like similar as well. The Badger has somewhat low alpha too, but the Badger at least has gun arc, and the gun is in the front of the tank, which makes it much easier to shoot people than having a gun in the back of the tank that's also a turretless TD. You know, the turretless TD and the gun in the back just kills this tank altogether. I just don't see why you'd even use this at all. It's a very bad tank in general. Also, I did actually miss out on a 268 V4 here. 268 V4 is actually, I'm going to put it where the YAG is. Basically, the gun is pretty bad. It is somewhat mobile and it has reactive, so to be honest, I kind of forgot about this tank for some reason. Sorry about that, guys. I'm actually going to put this tank here, I think, like, yeah, I think right there between the E3 and the 4005. Yeah, that's where I would put the 268 V4. Tank has reactive. That's the only thing that kind of making it in this position. It has decent armor, and although it has the same problem as a 263 where the gun is in the back of the tank, at least in that sense that it has enough, like, gun arc or whatever that you don't have to turn your whole tank just to shoot a tiny part, you know. Like if you want to shoot something to your left or whatever, you don't have to turn your whole tank to do it. Your gun can actually turn a little bit, you know. So in that sense, it makes it slightly, like, doable, but still a very tough tank to play, and just I don't see why it's worth playing it at all. I would not recommend it, like, whatsoever. So with that in mind, I think that took a while, but I think it was worth it. I did talk into a lot of detail about why I made this tier list. As I said, this tier list, I made it with in mind, like, the tournament, you know, experience, and trying to see, like, the, you know, the value of the tanks individually, where they can shine the brightest and where they shine the weakest. And yeah, overall, that's kind of where my tier list. I think this is the most in-depth tier list and the one that makes the most sense to me, because, as I said, for a reason, there's always a reason why tournament players use these tanks and they don't use the other tanks. And yeah, I think that's something a lot of the people who did the other tier list, you know, they kind of, like, didn't really focus that much on. Most of them just focused it on the fact that, oh yeah, you're going to run into players who don't know how to pen you, or players who misplay, and you're basically making a tier list based on the fact that, like, you're assuming that, you know, other people aren't going to be able to take advantage of your weaknesses, right? And that's kind of why I made this tier list, because this tier list, again, you know, a Mouse, for example, very good tank. It's the highest winner tank overall in general for pubs, right? But good players will not like the Mouse because it's just very limiting, and also in the same time, like, if you're fighting another good player who knows how to deal with you, you're not going to be able to do anything at all in the Mouse. It's very slow. So this tier list, yeah, I did put a lot of effort into it, and would greatly appreciate if you guys like and subscribe. Alright guys, so here we've reached the end of the video here, and as you can see here, I have two different tier lists. Now, as I said in the beginning, I did want to kind of compare the tier list that I ended up with and the tier list that other people did. And the first person I'm going to use is Droodles here. So I'm going to use Droodles' tier list here. He's on the left side, and my tier list is on the right. Now, the overall, to be honest, it can kind of see a lot of the things are pretty similar. However, there's a couple things I find very interesting, and I don't really agree with some of them. Mainly, if you look at his tier list here, he has a Sheridan and a 4005 in S tier. And for me, I have the Sheridan in the C tier, and I have 4005 in the B tier. To be honest, I don't really understand how the Sheridan is so highly rated in the S tier. In my view, it just gets outclassed by every other light tank. I mean, any other medium tank basically just destroys it as well, actually. So I'm kind of surprised about that. You know, didn't really fully expect that. Kind of surprised, to be fair. But again, that's kind of why I made my tier list, and obviously why he made his. You know, everyone's gonna have different opinions, and that's, I think, the whole point of the tier list is everybody has their own opinions. You know, there's no one correct tier list. Obviously, I think my tier list is probably more accurate. He probably thinks his tier list is better. Either way, I don't really care. I think it's all fun and games. I'm just enjoying the, you know, making the content for you guys. But yeah, in general, I'm kind of surprised about that one. And then anything else that I noticed that's kind of weird here. Let me take a look. We'll take a look through all of them. M48, I can kind of see that. Yo being an S tier kind of surprising as well for me. Again, I don't know how a two-shot Yo can really compete with tanks that have reactive armor in the current meta. Like, reactive armor is very strong, lots of tanks have it, and basically any autoloader kind of gets countered a little bit, and the Yo doesn't have any like super special gimmick. I do kind of see why it's like a little bit highly rated for him. It's probably because it's a very fun nuking pub tank. You know, it's basically like a 183 inside a heavy tank with a little bit more armor, but in the end it's still like very low DPM heavy, right? And I don't really see how it can compete. So Yo kind of surprises me. I don't really fully agree with that one. 57, again, it's an autoloader. I don't really see how it works that well in a you know, a reactive environment, but I do kind of agree with the 57 being a little bit higher than the Yo at least. So I can kind of see why. Concept, I agree. T95-6, yeah, I can agree with that. XM, E50, super comp type. Yeah, we already talked about 4005. Hori, the GFT, I think is a pretty good TD as well, actually. So I do kind of see where he's coming from for that one. Batchat 50B, I agree on both of them. Fosh, yeah, I can kind of see it. I mean, it's not the best, but yeah, I can kind of see it. So I can agree with that one as well. TVP, Caro, Rhinoceronte, can kind of agree with all of them. VZ as well, yeah. Kron, Minotaur though, absolutely disagree with that one. Minotaur for me is all the way down at the C tier. Again, Minotaur, it's a good tank when a noob is playing it. I don't think it's a good tank if you're fighting a good player who knows how to deal with it. You know, anyone who knows how to shoot heat, you know, the Minotaur just sucks, really, in my opinion. It's just the worst version of the Kron, as I already mentioned. So now moving down to A tier, overall, let's see what he has. So E5, E4, Leopard, KPZ, I7. I can kind of agree with all these five here. E100 being so high up in the A tier, I don't really agree with that. I think E100, to be honest, I have it all the way down in C tier. It is a little bit lower for me. Again, it's very unflexible, and I don't really know what you're really supposed to do with the DPM gun, really. There's not a whole lot you can do with it against good players, especially if they're taking hull down positions and they're in hull down tanks. Like, the DPM gun just isn't really going to be able to compete. So for me, I would kind of disagree with that one. VK90 being an A tier, I mean, I can kind of see it. I think I have the VK90. Where do I have it exactly? I think it should be, it's in B tier, yeah. So A tier and B tier, yeah, it's fairly close. I'd say I can kind of see it. Grill being an A tier for me, it's a little bit of a stretch. Again, Grill is a very unflexible tank. It is a nice TD in some situations, like if you can captain the back of the map the entire game. Yeah, it's a fantastic tank destroyer, but you know, the reality is against a lot of, you know, good players, you're going to eventually have to move because you're not going to be able to camp the entire time. You're going to have to use your, you know, mobility. You're going to have to move around. You're going to have to like start pushing a little bit and take some map control. And the Grill just cannot take any map control because it lacks any form of gun depression, in my opinion. So I don't see that being so high up in A tier. T100, T22, 907, I can see all those tanks. The Object 777, I think I can also see it. Yeah, 268, 24202, 215B, Chieftain, STB. I mean, these are all tanks I've rated pretty much the same. The 132, I also rated the WZ121. Yeah, I agree with that one. The MLE, I mean, yeah, I can see it. It's an A tier for me. It's an S tier, but basically only one tier difference, so it's not a big deal. 121B, Lion, Progetto, 60TB, I think, yeah, all these I agree. So for the most part, I've actually agreed pretty much, like, I think 80% I've agreed with the tier list that Doodles made. Now let's move on to the B tier here. M60, E3, RHM Pan. Okay, the RHM for me, I kind of disagree with that one. I think this one's much stronger than what people say it is. For me, this one should be in S tier. I have it in S tier as well. It basically is a really good light tank with gun depression, really. So I think it's a fairly solid one that's kind of slept on. I think it should be rated a little bit higher, but I do kind of see why he put it down low. The gun on that thing is really not that good. Especially on the move, and that's kind of, as a light tank, most of your shots are going to happen on the move, right? So I do kind of understand why it's in B tier for him. However, I think it should be a little bit higher, but yeah, I can kind of get it. Now we move on to the 263 B tier. I mean, again, a bit of a stretch for me. 263, I have it all the way down in D tier. For me, 263 is like the worst tank in the game, actually. So I'm really surprised he rated tanks like the 263 above like a tank like the 62A, the IS-4, the 260 even. I mean, these are all pretty decent tanks, and in my opinion, the 263 is just like the worst of the bunch. So kind of disagree with that one, but you know, it is what it is. Vickers in B tier, also a bit of a stretch, but you know, it's not too much of a stretch. I mean, I put mine in C tier, so overall can kind of agree with that. 268 V4, I agree. 183 as well, can agree. Badger, BZ, 113, 114, the 5A, the Murat. Yeah, I can kind of agree, actually. Yeah, overall, I think everything is fairly close to what I rated it. Yeah, so overall pretty much the same, you know, same decisions we came to the conclusion of here. Now down to the C tier that he has, VK72 mouse. Yeah, these I agree with all three of these. I think I have all three of them in here basically. The only one is that I don't know why the E100 is in B tier while the VK is in C tier. I mean, both of them are pretty bad. Both of them have the same problems early. So for me, I would put both of them in the C tier actually. But as I already talked about the E100, no need to really talk about it anymore. 140, 62A, IS4, yeah. C62 and IS4, I really don't understand why they're in C tier. The IS4 is a very, very good tank. It's a speed boosted tank with a very good turret and a good gun as well, and pretty good DPM. I don't know how you put this IS4 below the Object 777. At least the IS4 has good reverse speed, is more maneuverable, it has like better armor actually. The 777 is so low to the ground, it's like, you know, you really don't have any kind of like reverse speed to speak of. It's just very unflexible, and I don't agree with that at all. I think the IS4 is very, very underrated in Doodle's tier list here. I can't really see why it's so underrated. Same thing with the 260, to be honest. 260, I mean, if you think about it, 260 is essentially like an E6 without gun depression, if you think about it, right? It's the same things actually. It's just E6 without gun depression. And I mean, I don't think the gun depression alone should make it like all the way down to C tier versus an S tier E6. So don't really agree with that one. 30B, I think overall, yeah, can kind of see it being here. And 116 and Waffen, yeah, I agree with those ones. So overall, it's not too much I disagree with actually. You know, for the most part, I think we both have very similar lists. Although I think my list has a little bit, you know, I don't know. I think my list is a little bit more complete, to be fair, because you kind of like think about the tournaments aspect of it and like what good players can do with certain characteristics. And for example, again, like a good player running an IS4 speed boost can really, really put a lot of impact in, really, I think, to be honest. I don't know why it's so low, but that's just the thing it is. So that's the Droodle's tier list here. And now one other tier list I did want to compare it to was the viewer tier list. As you guys heard in the beginning of the video there, I did kind of, I was in the live stream that Droodles was in, where, you know, basically he was live streaming the tier list pick. And so people were voting for the tier list, you know, and whichever one got the most votes would end up being in the tier list that it was voted for, right? So I think that was a really cool idea, and I'm actually very curious how my list compares to that one. So let's pull that up real quick here, and I believe it should be in this one here. Yes, it should be this one. This is the tier list that the viewers came up with. So let's take a look. Again, Sheridan being an S tier, I disagree with that one. Don't really see how it's in that like really high category. It just, again, gets destroyed by every light tank. The Yo, I already talked about that one. Don't really agree with that one either. The E6, I agree. E50 Super Conk. 183 being an S tier is kind of insane. Yeah, there's no way 183 is an S tier. It's a very difficult tank to play. Any, you know, good player that knows like how to counter it is just, yeah, 183 is a very bad tank. It can be a good tank in some situations, but like really it's very limited. And if you have an enemy light tank who knows what he's doing, he's gonna easily spot you. And even if he doesn't spot you, he's gonna know where you are based on like where he hasn't spotted you, right? So I don't think 183 can be a good tank at all. It's huge and can never really enter a brawl situation. You know, if you have to move it or do anything, you know, to try to take control of the map a little bit, it just cannot do any of that stuff. So yeah, 183 being an S tier is a huge, very optimistic, I gotta say. But yeah, so I don't really agree with that one. Hori, WZ, 50B, Foch, Car, Rhinoceronte, Kron. I can agree with all of these ones kind of being in the A tier, S tier there. Minotaur, again, I mentioned it earlier. Minotaur, it's like, yeah, it's a good tank against noobs, but once you run into a player that knows what he's doing, I mean, Minotaur, all you gotta do is just switch your heat shell, and yeah, basically bye to all that armor. Yeah, just most useless tank ever, and the gun is pretty bad anyways. So yeah, I don't really see why the Minotaur would be an S tier. So overall, I only disagree with, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4 tanks that I disagree with. The rest I think are pretty good picks. Moving on to A tier, Patton 57, E5, Concept, E1, 10, E4, XM. I think these are all pretty okay picks actually. I don't really disagree with any of them. Leopard, KPZ, E100. Okay, I disagree with the E100. I already mentioned that before. Again, E100 is basically the same thing as a VK72. I actually think the VK is a little bit better than the E100, just because it has slightly more armor. And yeah, it's like not the best armor, but the turret at least is more armor than the E100 turret, you know. And so you can at least get a couple bounces from it. But the E100, you will never bounce anything, especially if the enemy has like a high penetrating gun, right? So I don't really agree with the E100. VK90, yeah, I can see it. Grill, I mean, again, a little optimistic in the A tier, but you know, okay, let's say we can kind of see it. I guess it's a decent tank. T100, T22, 907, I7, Object 77, 268. Yeah, I can agree with these 5. 215B, Chieftain, Badger. Okay, Badger being an A tier for me is kind of, again, a bit of a stretch. I have it all the way down, I think, in B tier here. In A tier, I mean, Badger for me is in the bottom of B tier, so it's actually almost closer to C tier than it is to, you know, A tier. And here you can see it's pretty like high up actually. So I don't know how I feel about that, but you know what? It's not a big difference. Other than that, STB, Type 71, WZ121, 121B, BZ75, 113, 5A. I think, yeah, these ones I all agree with. Batchat, MLE, TVP, Progetto, Lion, VZ55, 62B. Yeah, I agree with all of them. So in A tier, the only ones I kind of disagree with, I think, would be the Grill, the Badger, and the E100. Other than that, though, the rest seems pretty much like what I did as well. So overall, pretty much agree with that one. Now moving on to B tier, M60, E3, VK, RHM. Again, RHM in my opinion should be a little bit higher, but you know, B tier is not the worst. I guess it's pretty close to A tier, but still, I think it's a light tank. It deserves a little bit more recognition. You know, it is a very decent light tank. Mouse being in B tier for me, again, pretty surprising. I think Mouse is one of the worst tanks ever in tier 10 right now. Again, just there's no point to run a Mouse when you have an MLE that's like the same hit points as it, you know, and also similar armor, same DPM, is just much faster. I don't see why you would even use a Mouse. Yagi 100 in B tier also, you know, I can kind of see it. I put mine in C tier, so it makes sense. 140, 62 IS4, okay, yeah, somewhat makes sense. I think though the IS4, I mean, to be honest, again, I don't know why the IS4 would be less rated than the Object 777, for example. That doesn't make sense to me. Same thing I mentioned about the Doodles one. I mean, you know, the viewers obviously kind of, I think, may have taken a little bit of inspiration from what he did. But in my opinion, again, I think IS4 should be much higher. 260 as well. I mean, I can kind of see it. I think 260, to be honest, should be in A tier, but okay, I can see it overall. 263 being in B tier, a bit of a stretch for me. Again, I think the tank just sucks at everything. But overall, not the biggest deal. Overall, I think I can kind of see why they put it in B tier. It is a decent tank, and you know, in the hands of an average player, they can pretty much make it work a little bit at least. It does have decent DPM at least, so that's the one thing kind of going for it. 268 V4, yeah, I agree with Vickers. 4202, 4005, 114 SP2, the Murat, the 132, 30B. So yeah, I can agree with all of these ones. So overall, I think when you take the two comparisons between what I did there and what the viewers did, and also what Droodles did as well, I think a lot of the times we're very close actually. You know, when I was making my tier list, I didn't actually like I knew I disagreed with a couple things, but I didn't know like how close it would actually end up being. And I think overall it was fairly close to each other. I didn't even remember like the complete tier list here. Like I had to pull this up. I made this tier list based by like on watching the video. I just drew it up in here. That's the tier list that, you know, the viewers had. And yeah, overall, I think overall it's pretty close. Just I think my tier list has a little bit more recognition for a couple of attributes that maybe some of the other tanks here are not being really recognized for. Like again, the IS4, the speed boost, very, very strong tank. And the RHM as well, being like a light tank with gun depression, you know, is probably, I mean, the only other light tank with gun depression is like the Vickers, which I think the RHM, we can all agree, is much better than the Vickers, you know. And also in the same time, the Sheridan, you know, being so high up there, I just, yeah, again, I completely disagree with that. I don't see how the Sheridan could ever take a 1v1 with any other light tank. It is very situational, and you know, it's, yeah, even the gun is not that good anyways on it. So yeah, those are my opinions. And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I know there's a lot of people who made other tier lists, but this video is almost 2 hours long now, so I don't want to go any further. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure you like and subscribe. And once again, appreciate all the support, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.